time now is 1 o'clock. We will reconvene our budget retreat work session. And the agenda shows that we will be following along with innovation and technology. So we'll welcome you to the stand.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right. My name's Stephen Schwager. I'm the Technical Operations Manager. Stepping in for Mark. He's out on vacation this week. So thank you for having me again. So I just start with some funny slides here. Just what my friends think I do. You know, IT guys are typically loners. I'm obviously not used to presenting, so there'll be some stuttering today for sure. What all our users think we do, turn it off, turn it back on again. Believe it or not, it helps a lot, especially with Microsoft. More so than we care to admit. And then this is what we'd like to do at times. As you know, technology can be very frustrating. I know you guys have struggled with that here in the council as well, with the voting and that. It's a complex world out there, and we're trying to move dynamically to keep up with those needs. So here's what we actually do. We're a pretty small team for a city this size, or if we were a private company with the same revenues. We're 14 people. We used to be half technical. Now we're shifting more towards more technical. So we have a support department, a public safety support department, and I call them departments, they're really silos. Enterprise applications, then we have the technology consulting, which is more about bringing projects in and making sure we onboard those properly. AV, building security and cybersecurity, and then we'll just kind of dive into those. Before we do though, a little brief history. A long time ago, we were called data processing. If I had to guess, that's when we were making the transition from paper to digital world, right? And then when I came on board 7 years ago, when Mark was here 10, we were information services. We had green screens and terminals. I know Sherelle remembers that.
When I got here, I was like, what?
Yeah. She was our biggest cheerleader and helped us get us to a web-based system. So in 2020, we decided to change the name of the department to Innovation and Technology. We feel like when I got here, we were probably in that level 0, level 1 area. And it's been 7 to 10 long years to get us to that level 4. And I feel like we can finally contribute as a strategic business partner where we can get in with the departments and actually help them utilize the technology properly. So we get our money's worth. So started with support. These are the front line. We're an internal for the most part. And so help desk guys, incidents, requests. It could be break fix, VoIP support, user management, password management. I know you guys have dealt with them on the mobile device side, trying to get your devices assigned to you, getting you through training. Hardware requests could be monitors, printers. They also do AV support. That's a new one for us. Most technical IT guys, we don't dabble in that. It's usually separate, but just so you guys, like every Tuesday before council, we come through and sweep everything, try to make sure it's in a functioning good order before we do these meetings. And then the list goes on and on. Anytime we remodel a building or do moves, we have to move those users to a temporary spot, and then we have to move them back when the site's done. And it takes up a lot of work. So we're having to get them connected to the network, making sure all their stuff gets moved over. And so they're responsible for that. One of the things you're going to see on these slides, I just put some fun facts in the bottom. I didn't want to beat you guys down with a bunch of analytics and numbers and try to keep this moving fast. I know you got a busy afternoon. Just so far in this calendar year, when I took these numbers last week, they had closed 2,033 tickets. And that could be anything from a new request to something that's broken. That's David there. He started as an intern. He's now our support supervisor. And then we have 3 other guys, two full-time and 1 part-time. So public safety support. This is Cody. We recruited him after we promoted Michael. And so we support police and fire, and we have a large partnership with Intech. At one point, I think Mark and I, we restaffed their entire IT department and rebuilt the infrastructure when they were in a downfall probably 3 or 4 years ago. So that being said, one thing I did want to mention here, when we had the Snowmageddon, I don't know if you guys noticed, there's a huge 4G. It was degraded all the way across the city, and I don't know if that's because those carriers decided to not replace that equipment, and they made the jump to 5G. So it made us do it. So we've recently done that for police. So we have 5G cradle points in all the units, and huge help to Tom and Casey on your team. They're extraordinary to work with. And now we're going to start working with fire. So CAD, RMS, they have a new CAD system that's going in, so we've been helping with that training this week as well, and anything that touches that. So fire alerting, There's also tornado sirens that we work with as well. So we get to touch a lot of different things people probably don't realize. On the infrastructure side, that's actually Michael sitting there, Michael Hastings. And he was our public safety administrator on this for sport for them. And he's the only IT guy I know that's gotten a Chiefs Award. He usually saved that for the special officers. But he did get it. He made such a huge, large impact when we first brought him over there. He was awarded that. And so going back to infrastructure, I kind of consider it more advanced support. So they get a lot of the escalated tickets that Tier 1 or support can't quite work through, and they just need some extra attention, or maybe there's an issue on the network, firewall, servers. We do have 2 larger data centers in our city. We're really fortunate. Most of the cities around us only have 1, and it's not really considered a data center. We have 2, one at City Hall, one at the Justice Center, and then throughout the city, I'm estimating we have 20 miles of fiber that connects all the buildings back. So we're very fortunate to not have ISPs and internet providers at every single building. It would cost us a fortune and be a nightmare to manage, and we're very fortunate to have that fiber. But we do have to maintain it and keep up with it. So we do have wireless in all of our buildings, as you know. We're getting ready to upgrade that. That's on the list this month, actually. So that'll be exciting. And then one of the other big technologies we have that's wireless is on the water towers. So we have 2 point to multi-point systems at each water tower, and they kind of think that they blanket the city with the direction they're pointed. And what that's allowed us to do, if you'll see in that one picture, is we have a subscriber unit, and Public Works takes advantage of them mostly. So any of the lift station, pump stations, anybody that's out in the field that needs a true connection back to the network, we can point it at the direction of the water tower and now get them on an IP-based system. Used to be a 900 megahertz radio system, and it was a nightmare to manage because it's unreliable. And if you do any spectrum analysis in this area, it's saturated because of where we're at in Dallas. So there's a lot of interference, especially with the dark and everything that's going on. We also take on a lot of the projects, Michael and myself in this department. So any new projects that are coming in that need to be architected and the servers built, any kind of storage requirements, and a lot of the network. It's going to come from this group. You also see we have the little map in the bottom there. If you go into our department, you can see where all the nodes are located in the map, and if they're up and live, and we 24/7 monitor anything that goes down that's critical, and then we can respond to it. The next group would be enterprise applications. It's a fairly new group since we brought on Munis. It's our ERP system. That's where the general ledger is. That's where we do all of our finance. ExecuTime is payroll. Time clocks. Intergov is for permits and Leo's team. Encode would be the system that's for courts. Laserfish, document management. And then GIS, I know you guys had a pretty awesome presentation, I think it was last week or the week before. It's becoming so powerful with a lot of cities. I was just in a leadership program, and I think there was 50 members like myself from all over the country, and can't speak highly enough about what GIS could really bring into an organization. We're lucky to have somebody that's very talented, Brian. And then we also have a newer person on our team, John, and he's on the BI side. So now that we have these newer systems that have larger data sets, we can take all that data and pull it together and give them a nice dashboard or reporting and help them make strong business decisions, or at least have an idea what they're getting into. The technology consulting, I've already kind of talked about that. It's just trying to make strong decisions, and we have a position open now to be a technical business analyst. And the idea is for them to get with each department and make sure and try to help them. We don't want the technology to get in the way of the business. We want to be able to enhance it. So that's what we're trying to do. We've talked a little bit about AV. A lot of people don't realize how big that footprint is. Obviously, the council chambers here, the studio upstairs we have a hand in, our study session, the broadcast studio, the courts. It has a pretty elaborate AV system as well for everything that goes on there. And then we have 2 large training rooms. We have an EOC that also serves as training in our fire admin building. And then we have a training facility here that's fairly new, and that was to help bring the Munis along. And it's proved helpful for some other departments. I believe Shrupa has it scheduled for next week. And then you wouldn't think about it, but most of the departments here have conference rooms. And so with some of the CARES funding and some of the money that was coming in from last year during COVID, that's what that money, a lot of that money was for. So we put some of that into there as well. Another aspect that we are responsible for is building security. In some organizations, IT probably not have it. We have it here. And it makes a lot of sense because it's so complicated and everything is connected these days. And it's becoming more and more so. We've rebuilt the system twice. We're in the process of rebuilding it again to keep up with the need. So this year we've done the servers, and I know you guys have seen that come through. And then next year you'll see phase 2, which will be upgrading the cameras. So try to break it up. One, there's a cost that's associated to it, and one, it's time. So you got to think like a lot of the old facilities like the rec center, those cameras were put in when the building was built. So they're using coax, they're not IP based. So it's a longer project. So we have that broken out for next year. Burglar panels, it's under us. And one of the other big ones is active threat systems, active shooter lockdowns. We have one at City Hall here. It has been utilized once on a live event, and we're 90% way there at the rec center to get that one put in as well. And I'm assuming that trend's going to continue. Just fun facts on this one. We do have over 270 cameras throughout the city. I say that there's 25 buildings and sites. Now that may not be the same 25 that Kevin's keeping up with, but for us it plays into, say, the Gillis and the water towers and anything that might have a badge reader on it. So, and then we have 175 doors that are behind a panel as well. So, cybersecurity, last but not least, everybody's favorite subject. The security awareness training, I know it beats everybody down. There's a really strong reason for it. It's a state mandate now to stay in compliance. They did that for a reason because a large majority of the organizations that get compromised is going to come through that link. And they're very sophisticated. It's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry just in the United States for the bad guys. So you got to think we're trying to keep up with that, and we're just Farmers Branch. That being said, we have Scott Horner. He's with us today. He's our cybersecurity manager, and he's here for moral support. So our next phase, we're going to start doing penetration tests from the outside to kind of figure out what our vulnerabilities are and get those corrected. And that's the trend that's going to continue, just trying to keep up with that cutting edge. Incident response, if we were to have a bad incident to happen, how do you spring into action? How are you going to take control of that situation? FBI and whoever's going to be involved, we got to be right there ready and available to get the best out of this. It also kind of spills into the DR plan that you guys approved recently. Doesn't do you any good to be secure because there's a good chance that a lot of places are going to get compromised. I'm not saying that we are, but you better have a plan B and it better be rock solid. So we do replicate between the two data centers, and we also go up to the cloud so we can spin our servers up there. And, or if there's a natural disaster, it's not just breaches. So just another fun fact, we have what's called IPS systems. It's intrusion prevention. So just last week alone, there's over 5,000 detections. And what that means, that's people from all over the world that's knocking on our doors, trying to scan us, trying to poke, trying to prod, trying to find a way in. So if you guys travel internationally, now you know why we have stronger policy. It's a hassle, but there's a strong reason for it. So, and that's really all I have. I want to keep it short and sweet because I know you guys have a long afternoon. So any questions?
All right. Thank you, Stephen, for that presentation. Any questions? Go ahead, Richard.
Stephen, thank you very much. Big topic, particularly in the excuse me, in the corporate world as well. I just have one question for you on penetration tests.
Yes.
Are we conducting our own penetration tests, or are we also having an outside party do some penetration tests?
Third party.
Third party. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, and the reason why is, we have a team here that's got the skill set, but these larger organizations, these red teams is what they call them.
Right.
They eat, sleep, and breathe it day in and day out. They're the experts. So we're kind of, I hate to say it, we're the jack of all, ace of nothing, because we're spread thin, right? So we have to cover a lot of topics, but
Yeah. No.
third party.
I think it's a good approach.
Yeah, and there's a few ways to go about it as well. And so you have to have rules of engagement. And so to try to generate a real world scenario and something that's not going to impact our day-to-day business either, our operation.
Right.
So,
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
yeah, thanks.
Mr. Driscoll.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. This is critically important, and we know what's happened in some of our neighboring cities.
That's correct.
Not too distant past. Could you go back a slide or two?
Sure.
That one.
Okay.
At the bottom there in your fun facts is 5,000 plus intrusion detection events weekly. Can you enlighten us a little bit? Is that everything from just a phishing attempt to something more serious and more concentrated, professional, or?
Yeah, most of that's the IPS system I was saying. It's intrusion prevention. And so that sits on the perimeter of our networks. And so what it does is any traffic that passes through, it takes that packet apart, inspects it, It's looking at what is it trying to do. Like if I was to pull it up, you would see a lot of foreign countries like China and Russia, North Korea. It could be all over. It could be some kid down the road, right, that thinks he's going to learn how to hack or do something. And so anytime they go, they figure out, Farmers Branch, tx.gov, they figure out our IP addresses or try to figure us out. And a lot of this stuff, it's blanketed scans. They're not really targeting us. They're just throwing us out there across the internet and seeing what comes back and reports back will say, oh, port, RDP is the big one, right? So is 3096 open? Okay, it's open. So when you look in there, it's a lot of blanket scans and them just trying to find anything that might be available or open.
Right. And so part of my question is then if you've got 5,000 plus possible intrusions or, you're screening out a lot of it that's just people probing or looking for an easy access.
That's right.
How many would you say we get on a weekly, monthly basis or this year that you can tell they're really, a defined criminal organization or state sponsored? It's not someone down the street just probing.
Right.
Can you or outside people detect that?
That's a tough one. We do work with the partner on this as well to help us manage it. Sometimes we'll get what's called an EPS alert, and that's one that's on their watch list. It's very rare. Scott may be able to speak to it more.
Very rare. Most times the spray and pray approach, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Scanning general IP addresses.
And the way the IPS works too, it's hitting several databases that are international that collectively, like CISA and a lot of these government agencies that are putting out. So they're known bad IPs that they're coming from, or they're known vulnerabilities that they're looking for. So that database is updated several times throughout the day, actually. So that's probably a round answer to your question, but it's kind of tough to answer that directly.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. But experts I've listened to, they just say, what we've seen is like nothing like what's coming down the road. And I'm not a tech expert, but
Sure.
It's something that, I know you guys work on constantly, but we just have to be aware that there are these bad actors out there and, that want to do us serious harm on local level, national level, whatever.
Yeah, and there's all types. There's hacktivists, there's ones that are financially motivated. And like anytime we make the news, good or bad, mostly bad, if you looked in the IPS, that thing skyrockets every time. So just food for thought.
Thanks very much.
Yeah,
That's all
thank
I
you.
have.
Sorry, it's not more of a direct answer, but
I understand.
it's a hard one to answer.
Other questions for Steve? The heuristics process is quite impressive in allowing the third parties to provide that. Otherwise, you would not have the time to add all these 2,000 new vulnerabilities, on a monthly basis. If
Right.
we're gladly paying, third-party providers to do that because it's just a continuous, opening of vulnerabilities that are out there. And you're right, at the level of this group and every other staffer that's in this organization, making sure you don't click on the link.
That's right.
Is super important because, human firewall is the last link.
Most of it starts with the user, unfortunately, because
Correct.
we're the most active. And other things to think about, kind of going back to the vulnerabilities, you'll get those, for the internal staff, you guys probably don't see it as much, but internally, you come in on a Monday, you're getting geared up for a meeting, and this thing's squawking at you because it wants to reboot, right? And there's a good, strong reason for it, because these bad actors are finding these zero-day vulnerabilities. It's like you clicked on the link, or you go to a website, or you have any kind of interaction. Well, if we have a patch on that, it may prevent it. If we didn't, then it might just.
Correct.
And so.
Very good. Well, Stephen, thank you and your team for all you do, and I appreciate the presentation today.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Moving ahead, this puts us at sustainability and public health. Welcome to the podium, Shane.
I think I killed your spot here.
Podium PC. Scoot down some more.
Oh, is it there? Okay. I'll leave you to it. Thanks for your time. Take my notes too.
Good afternoon. Shane Davis, Director of Sustainability and Public Health. Our budget this year, unlike last year, didn't have as many big asks. There's a couple things we'll talk about that I want to highlight that should be on your radar, future council's radar, that are big, that are looming in the future. But this year is more of a continuation of the good things we've done this year and the year before, just building on those. Just a quick summary of the department. So going forward, we'll have two divisions from a financial standpoint. One is sustainability, trails, solid waste recycling. That's all in 4124. And we have the health, 4129. As you've heard more than once now, I think, animal services is moving from the fiscal year in terms of financial approvals to neighborhood services. The full-time employees we have for the department, we have 11, and we have one part-time employee. That's our summer intern from the health side. 4 of the full-time employees are dedicated solely to brush and bulk collection, and that includes the supervisor. And we have 1 full-time employee for the Citizens Collection Station. And then the remaining 6 handle the rest of the programs we're undercover. So our budget estimate for this coming year is about $6.2 million. So one of the programs or services we offer in this department is trails, and currently we have a trail master plan. One of the asks you'll see in the budget this year is to update that, and I'm trying to switch and get away from the word trails. The word trail in my world and funding level is a very specific term. It's 12 feet minimum width. There's very few places in the city where you can construct a 12-foot wide shared use path. B Street, our most current project, that is not a trail, that we're just widening the sidewalk to make that walk so you and whoever you're with can possibly walk side by side through the entire sidewalk instead of occasionally have to walk in a single file line. I'm just trying to make that more enjoyable walk, and plus homes in that area they have a destination they can go to between the DART station, the restaurants, Cox Farms. So really that's kind of what I'm trying to look at is what are our destinations in Farmers Branch going forward? And can you get there if you want to get there on foot or via bicycle? Are kind of my priorities looking at. So from our perspective, we kind of look at the planning side. We contract out the design and the construction. So design is handled through other engineering firms, and that's through the request for qualifications, request for proposal process, versus construction is handled through bid process. The health division. So this is public health and environmental health. This is not everything, but it covers probably 95% of what we do in this particular group. So we have a public health services contract. That's with Dallas County. Food establishment and public and semi-public pool. We're responsible for regulations, permitting, plan review, inspections, and enforcement. Staff does most of this, except for the routine inspections are handled by a contractor. So the contractor does the majority of the pool and routine food establishment permit inspections. We do the follow-up and any enforcement work. Industrial pretreatment is a term many of y'all may not have heard of, but there are some industries in our city, in fact we have 6 of them, that there's the potential that they would put something into the sewer system that is not in compliance with the TRA thresholds for those. So they have a permit, they do sampling and monitoring. We generate the permits. TRA is our contractor because all of our sewer goes to the TRA plant. They have people, because it's their plant, that are experts in this area. So they are the lead in terms of the investigations. They help us out tremendously in terms of permitting. But when it comes time to write someone up or cite them, it comes back to the city. That's our job, not theirs. But they are the experts. And so we go along with them to the inspections, but they're the lead authority when we get on site. Just in case you're curious, High Tech is one of the people we have a permit for. Stanley Black & Decker, Corvo. We have a couple of, we have Spirit, and I'm reading the other 2. But those are kind of airplane-related industries where they do some repairs on airplane parts. Mosquito surveillance, treatment, aerial fogging. This one, we pretty much contract out all of it. Municipal Mosquito does this for a lot of cities in the Metroplex. That's who our contractor is. So they set the surveillance traps, collect them, take them to Dallas County, or we share that, I think, with the neighboring city on occasion. And then if there is any spraying, which so far this year we've not had any spraying. In fact, I probably shouldn't say it. Dallas County's only had 4 positive traps for West Nile this entire year because of the lack of rain and the extreme heat we've had. So mosquitoes has so far not been a problem. Stormwater permitting and reporting and inspections and enforcement is also part of the health department. Liquid waste hauler is one, those are the folks that collect grit and grease trap. Not a truck you really want to be around when they're doing their job, in all honesty. If you see one doing that, just walk away and wait till they're done. It's the least fun job we have. None of us like doing this, but we got to do it when it comes time for inspections. And then municipal settings designation comes along once in a while. This is a very business-friendly approach for groundwater remediation. Our uppermost aquifer here in this area is very shallow. It's not very thick. You really couldn't run your home off of it. And that tends to be the one that is impacted. If you have a dry cleaner that over the years just dumped their stuff out back, it's that uppermost aquifer that they've contaminated. The Woodbine is the next one below it. That's pretty salty. It'd be kind of hard to use that at your house. You'd have to do some cleanup. Trinity is the one you want to use if you had your own personal property, but that's 1,800 feet down, so it's not cheap to get to it. But every once in a while, you'll see a municipal settings designation come across, which they'll be asking for your approval. And that is up to you whether you want to support it or not. If you don't support it, the applicant is dead in the water at that point in time. Solid waste and recycling. Interesting fact, any idea how many times a garbage truck, including our city staff, goes by? Or how many service opportunities we have? Anybody want to guess?
Over what period?
Over what time frame?
Just over a year.
Oh, gosh.
About 1.6 million opportunities. So when I hear people, this is what I keep in my head when people are screaming about their trash not being picked up. Okay. It's 1 or 2 out of 1.6 million. You got to think some of the houses have twice-a-week collection if you're on this side of 35, plus you have once-a-week recycling, plus once-a-week brush and bulk. Other side, it's once-a-week garbage, once-a-week recycling, once-a-week brush and bulk. Multiply that by all of our homes, depending upon your service frequency over the course of a year, and that's how many times this particular service goes by residents of Farmers Branch. Bulk collection is done by city staff, whereas the residential garbage and recycling and city facility garbage collection, that's done by CWD, that's our contractor. We have the Citizens Convenience Station that is operated by city staff. We have the City of Farmers Branch landfill, which that's primarily been me in terms of looking after that and dealing with any developers once they get past Allison in terms of here's what you have to go through to do anything out there. So I'm so thankful the solar project got signed because no one else can come around kicking tires anymore. And then, of course, we have Camelot Landfill, which is located in Louisville, Texas. And a couple of y'all probably need to go visit. Because I don't think either one, have you been up there yet? Omar, have you been? It's good for y'all to go see, just to see where it's at and what goes into a landfill operation. And any of the rest of y'all want to go again, I'll be more than happy to take y'all. But I will reach out to y'all and see if we can schedule a tour up there so you can see what's going on. Sustainability. We recently were nominated for a Corporate Citizenship Award. Aligned Data Centers actually won. And once I heard what they did, I get why. But it was very nice to be the only city nominated for this particular award through CEO. Dallas College was also nominated, but it was neat to be recognized for a city our size for the things we've done recently. We have a sustainability plan, which has been approved by council. This year, working on electrical vehicle infrastructure, and that'll be a continuing ask of the next year, getting ready for converting our fleet when the time comes. Renewable energy, we have 4 sites now in the city of Farmers Branch, 4 buildings that have solar arrays on the top. Landfill solar one we've discussed. One thing we're probably looking at going forward this coming year is trying to look at energy efficient codes. One thing Texas as a whole is really not focused a whole lot on is energy efficiency, in all honesty. Each time they update the codes, you do tend to get an update and upgrade in terms of energy efficiency, but really trying to look at where could solar go in the future. The most recent federal bill that passed certainly is incentivizing folks to have a strong look at solar projects. And so are we ready? Do we have codes in place that would make that, either make developers have the capacity if they want to do it later, or also making sure it's friendly enough for homes to be able to achieve what they want to do at their home as well. Water conservation certainly is rearing its head at the moment, so it's a concern for us as well as the Sustainability Committee. And we tend to look at development projects from a walkability standpoint. Do we have sidewalks going forward? You've raised a couple of issues recently in terms of gaps in sidewalks in your neighborhood. So going forward, we want to try and make sure those don't happen with new developments and that we have sidewalks being put in. We don't have to go back after the fact and try and fill in those gaps, which would kind of be the impetus or what I'd be looking at with the pedestrian plan. So kind of here's our budget ask for this coming year. We have a $100,000 request. This is for EV infrastructure, primarily at Senlac Service Center, and the potential for a fast charging grant. If we didn't get the grant, then that wouldn't, so that'd be one we'd be reimbursed for. If we don't get it, then that goes away. But in terms of what we will be installing is at the Senlac Service Center, which of our fleet vehicles are parked. getting that infrastructure ready, and then we can always build on from there and put as many chargers as we want. We just want to get the initial infrastructure in place as we begin fleet conversion. $10,000 tree giveaway program. So with the storm recently and then some stumps, we looked at, Alex Farmakis came from the city of Plano where they operated a tree giveaway program, so we have some experience with this. This will be contracted out. So as city staff, we would contract with, is Alex in the room?
Back row.
Texas Trees, possibly. Yes. Texas Trees is one of the few organizations out there that does that for this program, but they pretty much manage it for us. So it'll be another service we contract out. Here's the $75,000 ask for the pedestrian cycling plan, which would be an upgrade or replace the trail master plan. One I really want to talk about is this next one, the $1 million transfer to closure post-closure fund. My original request, you'll know, is $2 million. You have a $36.5 million liability hanging out there in the future. So going forward, it needs to be a priority for y'all and future councils to make sure you're putting money in there to cover that. You can always issue debt at the end, but that's a pretty big chunk of debt. That number's going to grow each year due to inflation. And as we get more and more of the landfill built out. So that one just needs to be on your radar going forward. The other big jump in our budget is just the garbage contract. So every time you need to add a new house, that's another house we got to service, and that's an added cost to it. And then I also have to try and project how many homes are going to take carts versus bags. There's a slight increase in cost for carts over bags. So those are kind of the big things I saw in our budget that may catch your eye. Just real quickly to point out, my staff is in the audience, so in case y'all see him and ever interact with them. Our newest hire is Robert Diaz. He came from the city of Wiley. He worked at Farmers Branch a long time ago. He actually worked with John. He went to Wiley and finished up his 25 years, retired, and is starting over. So Robert's in the blue shirt. Shwaria Tareen is now the Deputy Director for Sustainability. She has not been here long, but she has made incredible strides on the health side in terms of redoing almost every ordinance related to health. Using Intergov to its fullest. So we have a software that, because of her, we're using it more than I ever thought we could. And we're focused this year really on just trying to make sure, from a business standpoint for the permits, can you find the information you need, and is our permitting process as smooth as possible? We're not going to bend the rules for you, but we want to make sure that when you interact with us, you can find what you need quickly. It's as clear as it can be. We've recently had someone do this in English. I had Robert do it, brand new, so we had no clue kind of what our ordinance was to begin with. And I had someone in HR do it from a Spanish-only standpoint. We have some business owners that don't speak English, so can they get through our process? So we have a person on staff that can translate, but I'd like to try and make that as easy for them up front as possible, too. Alex Farmakis, our sustainability manager in the back. And maybe I'll show up. I think that's it for my staff. Do what? Okay. And then Eldo couldn't make it. He's busy with the business, it sounds like. That's our new health manager. At this point in time, I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Well, thank you, Shane, for your presentation and all the work that the group does. Any questions from the council?
Of course I have questions.
Of course. Richard, go right ahead.
I don't have to be first all the time.
No.
Thank you, Shane. Appreciate it. I know you guys worked hard, especially during the wind event here recently.
Yeah, at some point in time, I want to get those guys up here just so you can see who they are.
Yeah,
And when you hear it's 3 or 4 guys that did all that themselves.
Yeah.
I checked with our emergency management what it would take to enact an emergency response contract. I think it's $1 million just to activate those folks to come in and start helping out. So
Yeah, good.
we certainly looked at lessons learned, what can we do better, and that's probably documenting up front. Here's what this part of town has gone through. You may not see it in your neighborhood, but by golly, this other half of the town, here's what it looks like over there. So
Right.
please have patience. So there's a lesson learned from us.
There
What
were
we
a
do
lot
better.
of moving parts going
Yes.
on during that time, and I know you guys took some lumps, but you got the job done and served our city well, so thank you very much for that. And I look forward to touring the Camelot landfill, the dump. I'm assuming you have a finders keepers rule in place out there, perhaps?
No scavenging allowed, sir.
So just a couple of questions on the budget request. $100,000 for electric vehicle infrastructure. If we don't get a grant, then we're not going to do that.
That's a different one altogether. The 100,000 that we will spend is for city itself. The fast charging one, we looked at a grant, which would then we'd have a revenue to offset the cost.
Okay,
If we don't get it, then that goes away. We won't touch that. But there is a
Understood.
100,000 program just for the city fleet, preparing for the future.
understood. And then the $75,000 for the pedestrian cycle plan, is part of that bike lane markers on the streets, or is that some?
That's what I'd be looking at. Where does it make sense? I'd love to have more interaction with people. We've had the bike to work events. I talked to the folks that showed up out there. You didn't need to, but other folks that showed up. Just kind of what gets them out. When do you ride? I live in Dallas and I've ridden my bike to work a couple times. I'm fine until I get to 635. Getting across 635, not a fun experience. Then I can easily get onto the residential roads and I'm fine.
Right.
And so that's why a lot of folks just, even though there's Sharrows on Valley View, they may not necessarily feel comfortable enough. If you ride often, you probably get out there, but if you're just a casual recreational rider and I just want to go to the store and get a couple items and ride my bike back,
Sure.
you may not necessarily do that. So I would kind of want to look at how else can we get, so on the north side of Valley View, we have the Rawhide Parkway. And my personal thought is, I just want someone to tell me I'm right or wrong, we get folks that Rawhide Greenbelt, run them through there going east-west across our city. It's a safe ride, it's an enjoyable ride. South of Valley View is identifying how we get folks across the city besides Valley View.
Right.
We always tell folks about Valley View, but some folks may just want to, I don't call any names, but some roads south of Valley View that are very nice, they're very wide, with no on-street parking. To me, it's a pretty good case for having a bike lane there. It's just striping, this is where you ride. But looking at things like that is what I would think to do.
Yeah, agreed. I ride the city on my bike,
Okay.
Usually about 30 miles a week.
Okay.
And so I've got a lot of ideas around that myself.
Very good. Love to
Yeah.
spend some time and pick your brain.
I've noticed that the markers along Valley View Lane, which I'm not concerned about riding Valley View Lane, but I wouldn't recommend a recreational biker to do that. You need equipment, signals, that kind of thing. But those markers on Valley View Lane have faded, so
Yes.
they may need to be repainted or just pressure washed, whatever that is, but that would be a part of this.
Certainly a recommendation. I've had discussions with, we're going to talk about it now, or you want to wait for you to ask? He's brought up the idea of originally we stopped at 35.
Right.
So when the original ones were installed, the west side of 35 was commercial. There was no intent for homes at that point in time. The zoning changed the year after they put down the Sharrows. So I looked at a cost, what it cost to put the Sharrows beginning from Josie all the way to Luna, to kind of have the Sharrows going all the way across the city. So we've got an estimate on that.
Okay.
I think it's about 30,000 was our guess. We haven't bid it out. We could come back in higher, but we just kind of looked at what have we paid in the past and did our best to.
Okay, so that's
with the
part
cost.
of this plan. I just wanted
It
to
would
make
be.
sure I understood. There were a number of residents that brought that up in their community visioning
Oh, good.
process. So they're thinking about it too. I know there were some stickies with that on it,
Okay.
on the map. So that's great. Thank you very much. That's
Yes,
all I
sir.
have.
Go ahead.
So the 75 already includes, you said it was about 30, 35 for the Sharrows?
It does not include that. That was just
Okay.
an estimate after you and I talked, trying to figure out what would that cost to put that in.
Okay, and
So
then,
it's money we'd have to go figure out, do we have it somewhere now, or do we need to program it in for next year?
I see. So John, is that something that gets discussed tomorrow? Is that,
No, that, you can bring it up right now while he has the floor, or we're gonna, when we wrap up, I guess, the communications presentation, the floor is yours for whatever you want to talk about. That's for as long as you want to talk about.
okay. Yeah, so I guess if you can maybe share a little bit about what we discussed regarding the Sharrows and kind of what the plan was behind that.
Yeah, you had complaints where we'd stopped at 35, and when the staff went on and looked and realized, okay, we've actually stopped. They did some major renovations or repairs from Josie actually to 35, and they got erased in some cases, basically beginning at Josie. So really, we need to reinstall them if we want to do this beginning at Josie going westward. I'm assuming something at this level would be CIP, Cheryl, or I'm sorry if I put you on the spot, apologies, but that's kind of my thought, something like that. Maybe looked at the CIP.
The $30,000 amount?
I mean, we can figure it out later. I'm just
We
trying to think.
probably wouldn't run that through
Okay.
CIP, but it would probably more appropriately fit in a different fund.
Got it.
Yeah.
And whether it be sustainability or streets, that's kind of, we'd have to figure that out internally as well. But if there's something y'all want, we'll certainly look at making that happen.
Sure. Yeah, that was it. It was just, there was some residents who live on the west side who, they're avid cyclists and express concerns with the disconnect that they feel to the central point of the city because they can't bike over here safely. And so that's kind of where the concern
Right.
came up, and you've researched the cost, and I think there were some, I don't know if this was a discussion I had with John or with you, but I think that we were going to look into what it would look like to make the west side bike-friendly, similar to kind of how we have
Okay.
it on this side. But maybe we can discuss that later.
Yes, we're willing to.
Sure.
So Shane, you made a reference, and I inadvertently, in yesterday's presentation with Parks, brought up the
Right.
trail improvements. And I know you had a slide, is part of that the trail master plan, but what else is included in that $789,000 that we have there?
$789,000, which,
I think that was from your presentation. We had that in the bond, or the, wasn't that in the bond?
I think it was in hers, yeah.
Yeah.
Are we referencing,
Capital improvement project, it's listed as trail improvements. We
Oh,
have
Shane,
700.
okay, is it non-bond CIP or is it,
it's in CIP.
okay, we have non-bond and then we also have money in bond fund. We're targeting
It's from
towards,
the bond fund.
okay. More than likely it's targeted for projects that were originally identified in the trail master plan. So B Street got moved up. The next one we'll probably look at is those portions of Valley View for those that haven't made the walk. If you
So it's a
go,
continuation of the trail master.
existing one, correct. We've got a couple
that's fine.
places we think would be good to make the walk experience a little better.
Fine.
It's like going up Valley View, if you walk on the north side heading east, you got a curb that separates you between cars. I know it says 35, and our police is very good about obtaining compliance, but there are some folks that don't adhere to that. And you got a 6-inch piece of curb separating from you cars coming down that hill. That's not a real fun walk. I would want to try and get that a little further away from the curb.
Understood.
If I'm walking it, I've stood out there a couple times. So it's things like that, trying to where can we target, makes things feel a little safer, and where are you actually going somewhere? Because if you can get to Brookhaven College, you got some trails and some other walking options that are really nice.
Correct.
You can get to Vitruvian Park and look over there. So getting folks to places like that is what I'm looking at, and I'd like to emphasize. So it'd be targeting projects like that.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else? John?
Just a real quick shout out to Juaria. So we often talk about economic development's not a department, it's an effort. And when we were recruiting Crossbuck, they had some very technical questions, and we reached out to Juaria. I didn't realize it was on her off day, and she actually drove into work to meet with the owners of Crossbuck to convince them that this was a very non-traditional space. It was a printing office, and that we were going to be able to make that work for them, and they are now here. So that doesn't happen very many places.
Agreed. Thank you. All right. Well, Shane, thank you very much for your presentation and all that the staff does and will be doing for us. And that brings us to communications.
It's a cleanup hitter.
Jeff Brady.
This is the moment we've all been waiting for.
Congratulations.
Don't turn
All the
around.
staff
Don't look at the back of the room. Don't look at the back of the room.
They left too soon. Seriously,
Gone too soon.
gone too soon.
There you go.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council, Jeff Brady, your Director of Communications. And I am so glad to be batting cleanup for you here today. Clearly, John orchestrated this entire budget presentation to save the best for last, and here we are. Mine is very brief, but seriously, I'm so glad to have, well, look, they're gone. I don't even need to say it now, but I was going to say something about being glad to present with sustainability and IT. This is a side note, doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with the budget, but you, ladies and gentlemen, would probably be amazed to know how we have to work hand in glove with IT every other Tuesday night to pull off what we do apparently seamlessly, in this building. When you think about the little iPads you have in front of you and the voting technology that we had to implement, as well as the acoustics in this room, as well as the screen above you and the screens in front of you, and, oh, by the way, everyone who watches on TV, on YouTube or Spectrum or perhaps AT&T. Oh, and by the way, the people who have to zoom in, who also have to see and receive all that AV and send it back out. So there's a lot going on that we tend to, me included, we tend to take for granted, but we're so blessed to have an IT department like we do that is accomplished and has all the personnel, and now they're not even here to hear me say all this glowing thing. And also sustainability is phenomenal. We work hand in glove with all of our departments in communications, but it's been really fun to work with sustainability because of a really interesting and innovative project that you already know about, our solar farm, and I've got a little show and tell at the end of my presentation to showcase what we do. So it's great to work in an organization that really believes in world-class service, and we do. So let me just pull this up here. Here we go. Somebody closed all these windows. Here we go. Okay. So once again, Jeff Brady, your Director of Communications here in the beautiful city of Farmers Branch. I have a very brief overview, and what I'd like to do is hit a couple of highlights of the last year. So just to point out what we're doing for the city, to showcase the city. I'd also like to describe 2 additions to our budget, as modest as they are. These are 2 contractors that I think will make a profound difference in what we do day to day. And then lastly, I'd like to show you an example of how we're spending public funds in a new and innovative way to tell our story. And we've got a great story to tell. And I think this is a really good example of what we do and how we get the message across. First of all, some highlights. As John mentioned yesterday, we have won 4 national awards in communications. Not local, not state, not regional. Those are great. These are national awards, 2 Tellys and 2 3CMA awards. 3CMA, for those of you who don't know, is our professional organization. So, and I'll be going back to the 3CMA conference in Portland next month, and we're up for a couple of more awards. So, and we're up for an Emmy this year for one of our pieces that we produced last year. So I believe we're really helping to put Farmers Branch on a national stage. We're launching, this is something that John and I have worked, we're very excited about. We're in the process and about to launch what we call a Citizens Communications Council. It hasn't started yet, but the idea is to develop a team of volunteers who will come together with us about once a quarter, and who will each be either block captains or ambassadors for their neighborhoods, their apartment complexes, their parts of town. And so we can get from them what we need to hear in terms of interest or concerns in all of those neighborhoods. And then also we can use them to help deploy information, important programs, launches, announcements that we need to better convey. Because as much as we put out, printed material, it's great. People don't read. People really don't read that much, and there's certainly whatever the city puts out that's in your inbox, unless you're a devoted, city servant like we are, that may not be at the very top of your to-do list is read an email from the city. So my belief is the more we can do to enable multimedia and make it easy for people, or God forbid, even entertaining for people to consume information that we want them to have, we're in a better situation. So, and sometimes that's verbal, just old-fashioned talking to people. So the idea is we will convene this group about once a quarter, volunteers, feed them in this space, bring them in, and just talk for about an hour. Listen first, and then talk about what we want to convey. And so we tapped pause on that just a little bit because our contractor that's helping us with the comprehensive plan, the citywide comprehensive plan, has a similar program they're about to launch, so we didn't want to muddy the water. But as soon as that starts to fade, we'll kind of dovetail off of that with our own Citizens Communication Council. And we're excited about that. I think it'll be really effective. Some of you already know also in the last year we've launched a partnership with Turner High School. I'm so excited about this. We have some really talented high school students with the AMAT program. So it's an acronym, Academy of Media, Arts and Technology. They're very talented with the camera. And so we can give these kids an assignment or a request to go out and cover a story that's relevant to the city of Farmers Branch. They go out, they host it, they shoot the video, they edit the video, and then they submit it to us for approval, and then we post it on multiple platforms, social media sites, our website, as well as FBTV, and it's been a real win. I think we give them an opportunity to showcase their talents, and we selfishly also get to grow our audience because their moms and dads and brothers and sisters and parents want to see them on TV. And so I'm hoping that that's a real win-win. We enjoy working with them. We've also enhanced our bilingual outreach. Some of you may know we now produce the branch review in Spanish, entirely in Spanish, as well as English, and that Spanish language version is available through a QR code as a page on our website. So I think that's a benefit too, and we're always looking for more ways to advance. Okay, so these couple of new positions. I'm really excited about this one in particular. We're going to recruit and hire a contractor as a city website administrator. So this is going to be the go-to person for our website. And I think this kind of position is long overdue. It may, at some point, morph into a staff position. We don't know. I can't say that yet. But at some point, that's not beyond the realm of possibility. But this will be a part-time position for now, to begin with, who will oversee so many things that we need to be doing on a continual, ongoing basis with our website. ADA compliance, a consistent voice across all the departments, a consistent look, new content, posting new content on a regular basis, removal of outdated content. Now, we're doing all these things, but it's a lot. And as technology advances and as people expect more and more from our digital front door, which is our website, we need to have someone who's the point person, who is the go-to person who does this full time. And so all of these activities are going to fall under this person's purview. Accurate links, making sure all the links are accurate and they're working. A calendar. An engaged calendar that's prominent on the website so citizens can go to it and see when the next council meeting is and beyond, perhaps even parks events as well on one combined calendar. Other cities do it, we should be too. The overall user experience, and develop regular reports on web analytics. And so the concept here is to develop a calendar so that we would be proactive on an annual basis, going through department by department and just combing through those websites and looking for ways we can improve it, looking for material that needs to come down, and making sure what we have up there is the most important, most accurate, and the best we can do. And so I just think we're long overdue to have someone who is really doing that full time, all the time, who's the go-to person. So that's one position we'll be adding, and I've worked with HR to develop this job description and a budget for it. It's going to be about $40,000 for that contractor. And then the other position is a social media manager. So this is going to be someone who's going to work specifically for us at City Hall. So not fire, not police social media, not parks social media, but specifically for what we oversee here coming out of City Hall. Again, a part-time position, oversee an annual social media content calendar. Boots on the ground, to go out and get pictures. Sometimes we are kind of trapped in this building and I don't get out as much as I need to see, to talk to people, to take pictures of, what we have, events and activities on the ground. This person also really needs to be bilingual. So we can have bilingual posts, I believe, based on the, the snapshot of who we are now as a city. So focused on City Hall events, City Council events, perhaps, National Night Out, code enforcement, sustainability, public works, public health, and the list goes on. So these are all topics, and not that we will work hand in glove with other departments. If there's something that Parks really needs to promote, of course, we'll complement that. But this is a person to specifically focus on these topics that we're pushing from this department, from City Hall. And like I said, coordinating messages with other departments. Okay, so lastly, this is a little show and tell. You've sat through all of these long presentations. You deserve a reward. You deserve to see something that's fun. So I'm really excited about this, and some of you may have already seen. It's a very short video. It's about 1 minute long. And we worked hand in glove with Alex. Even Alex left. Good grief, everybody bailed. Well, I know. What does that say? I'm not going to read too much into that. But Levitate is the partner. We partnered with an outside firm that specializes in animated video. And we wanted to educate the public on the new solar farm. Okay, so this is a highly visual product. It's got simple, compelling graphics. It explains the benefits to citizens. It lays the groundwork for future explanatory videos, maybe about the solar farm once it's up and running, maybe about other topics. And it'll help share the story on website and social media, as well as when Alex and others from our sustainability department go out to present to the public, to schools, or to sustainability organizations or to other cities around the Metroplex. They've already used it, I think, once for a proposal or a presentation like this at SMU. And it is bilingual. So let's take a look. Let's see here. Let's see, here we go.
Did you know that Farmers Branch will soon be powered by renewable solar energy? That's right. We'll soon have a solar farm in Farmers Branch generating more electricity than the city uses to power its buildings and streetlights. It will be built here on a closed landfill at Valley View and the George Bush Tollway. Dozens of rows of photovoltaic panels will be installed in a tight configuration like this. They'll absorb energy from the sun, convert it into electricity, and send it to the Texas power grid for distribution. Our solar farm will guarantee the city an affordable electricity rate for 20 years, reduce air pollution, and make Farmers Branch a leader in renewable energy. Even better, the development firm will pay for the design, installation, operation, and maintenance, meaning city taxpayers will have no upfront cost. Increasing renewable energy is crucial, and this project puts Farmers Branch on the path to a sustainable, low-carbon future for decades to come.
Okay, there it is. And we have the same thing in Spanish. You want to see the Spanish version?
Sure.
Yes? No? Yeah, okay, let's see it. It's very similar. Different voice.
¿Sabías que pronto Farmers Branch utilizará energía solar renovable? Así es. Pronto tendremos una granja solar en Farmers Branch que generará más electricidad de lo que utiliza la ciudad para darle energía a sus edificios y luces de las calles. Será construida aquí, en un vertedero cerrado entre Valley View y la autopista George Bush. Serán instaladas docenas de paneles fotovoltaicos, uno cerca del otro, de esta forma. Absorberán la energía del sol, la convertirán en electricidad y la enviarán a la red eléctrica de Texas para redistribuirla. Nuestra granja solar garantizará que la ciudad tenga una tarifa de energía asequible durante 20 años, reducirá la polución en el aire y hará que Farmers Branch sea líder en energías renovables. Mejor aún, la empresa de desarrollo pagará por el diseño, instalación, operación y el mantenimiento. Esto significa que los contribuyentes de la ciudad no tendrán ningún costo inicial. Aumentando el uso de energías renovables es crucial, y este proyecto pone a Farmers Branch en el camino hacia un futuro sostenible, con emisiones de carbono bajas que durará décadas.
And there you go. So I'm excited about this. I think it's a really good example of what we can do. We have a great story to tell. This is one of many, and we're happy to do it. So if there are any questions, I would be more than happy to take a stab at them.
Jeff, thank you very much for the presentation. Tracy, look like you want to go?
I just had a couple of comments, really. I'm very excited that you guys are adding a city website admin person. I think that's long overdue, and I'm excited to see what we can do. I love the new website, but I think there's some user friendliness items that could use some help, and so I'm excited to see that, as well as having a social media manager. Just from my personal standpoint, as well as from my industry standpoint, the social media really is the quickest way to get information out to people. Your video that you just showed, I also shared on my social media platforms.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I would encourage all of us as council people to, I know not everyone plays on the social media platforms as much as others, but I think that's a great way to get that information out, and having something that digestible, it's so informative, it's so positive, it's wonderful. I would encourage, I know that they will focus on the city hall events and city councils goings on, but I know for you guys, you see yourselves, each department is very separate, but for residents and for business owners in the city, we see you all as the city,
Right.
Farmers Branch. And I know that from a business standpoint, getting all of that to be cohesive, even if they're managed by others, but there being like a cohesive branding in all of that, and that cross sharing is vital. Just because residents will look at it and say, "Well, I follow the city, and I never saw that item." Well, you're not following City Hall. You're only following Parks and Rec,
Right.
which doesn't include library. But there's also this other one.
It is mind-boggling how many social media
Yes.
platforms there are across the city.
Yes. Well, and like a lot of people thought the FBTX was the City Hall, and that's actually our tourism. But they thought that was the same thing. And so I would encourage, if they're not going to be managed by one person or by one entity, at least I would encourage their communications
To coordinate.
between and to coordinate between them, because that makes it a lot easier, even as council members, if we are wanting to share information with our, through our social media, if we have one place that we really know that, hey, everything's going to go through here and we can share from there, or vice versa, then it makes it easier for us as well. So, but I think that's great to add those two. I think those are vital roles, especially as we start moving into our comprehensive planning and trying to get the resident engagement. That I think that's going to be a big part of it. So I commend you, Mr. Brady.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Omar, go right ahead.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yes, sir.
I'm so glad you guys are hiring a contractor to work on the website. I agree. I've heard some residents' concerns about the clunkiness of it. And I'm particularly excited about the calendar because sometimes it gets difficult to pay attention to either multiple social media channels or multiple websites. And then it's also, you get things in the mail, you get things via email. And so it's nice to have everything in one place and say, here's what's going on in the entire city, so that you don't have to look at different places. We were talking during lunch over some fantastic events that the historical park has. It's also nice to be able to get that information to people in one place so that we have a greater attendance. I know some events get sold out, but other events, it's difficult to reach certain demographics. And so if it's one place where people can look, then I think that's a positive. The social media manager, I've worked with Mike before in Parks and Rec for some marketing things in the past, and he's through our conversation I learned that there was Varsha does some marketing work for us, and then Rachel also does some marketing work for us, and now we're adding another marketing person. So I'm trying to understand maybe some of the differences between the different marketing teams that we have.
Yeah, that's a good point. The vast majority of the marketing, and that is commercial marketing that we do as a city, has to do with our parks department and really raising awareness for our facilities, whether that's the rec center, now the library under parks, or the events where we're really trying to raise awareness and draw a crowd. So that's the bulwark, that's really the largest majority. But there's a big piece of marketing also, or social media awareness, as it were, that doesn't fall under parks. And that might have to do with kind of the list I had here on one of the slides. Things that come out of City Hall: sustainability, public health, the Animal Adoption Center, code enforcement, sustainability, the landfill. So all those things will be what this social media manager focuses on, trying to raise awareness through social media of those activities, those events, those facilities. So we'll work hand in glove with parks and we have to. It has to be one unified voice as a city, but we don't want to ignore other important topics that have to do with the city that the citizens need to know about that don't necessarily fall under parks.
I see.
So that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Richard?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
I always feel like I'm watching the 10 o'clock news when I'm listening to you.
Coming up next, tune in tonight at 10.
That's right. I'm just constantly impressed with the way that you bring Farmers Branch onto the screen and in front of the people. It's really pretty spectacular.
Well, thank you.
I've had friends from outside of Farmers Branch visit at various events and like, where'd y'all hire this guy?
Yeah.
Like, he was a carnival barker at
Right, yeah. He was at the circus. Circus passed through town, and we picked him up.
So well done, but I think Tracy and Omar said it really well. It's all about it. We've got all these different pieces and parts, and not only is it not an optimum user experience, but to the outside, we don't look like we're one city. And there's a lot of different people doing different things, and I know that's just kind of what you get over a period of time when something's not centralized, and that's the direction that you're moving in. So I would just simply echo Tracy and Omar's comments that we keep focusing on making everything seamless. Navigation on the website, we have a lot of opportunity for improvement there. I constantly hear from residents, well, nobody told me about that. Well, it's out there, it's just kind of hard to find. And they may be subscribed to one, like you had mentioned, they may be subscribed to one channel of communication and not another, and it didn't come to them through the one that they're subscribed to. And so, and there is some ownership that residents need to have in understanding what's going on in the city and listening, but I definitely think we can do a better job, and I appreciate your attention in that area.
Absolutely,
Thank
yeah.
you.
And Jeff, that Citizens Committee, we think is going to help with that quite a bit too.
I think so too,
We
yeah.
have an amazing opportunity with 36 neighborhoods that somehow, on a night, get everyone to show up at the right address, bring food. They have police officers there, fire department personnel, their city personnel there, their council member, and somehow, and they don't do any of that with us. That's just, they have those networks, and we just need to tap into that and say, how do you want to receive information? And it may be different for each of the areas.
Or what do we need to hear?
Yeah.
What do you want to tell us, or I'm sure they're, passing those messages on through each district, but, just kind of an informal forum for people to convey information and to hear what we're trying to project.
So Jeff, my question would be, the contractual agreements that we're entering into, how many hours are we looking at? Perhaps is it on a monthly basis or on a weekly basis? I know it's not a full-time staff.
Right.
And so contractually, have we written those RFPs?
We,
yet?
that's in the process.
Okay.
We've written the job description, and so we're now farming those job descriptions out. And we're working with an agency to help do a little headhunting to find the right people. The problem is, as all of you know, I'm sure, it's hard to find anybody. And even when you think you found the right person, that person may leave. Even though they said yes, they move on to a job that's going to pay them $2 more per hour.
Sure.
So, but I think, it'll be, we have to stay below a certain benchmark and so that they don't become de facto full-time employees. So we're working with HR to make sure we stay within those guidelines.
Okay, very good, thank you. Any other questions for Jeff?
I just had one more thing to add.
Go
I know with us working with the new contractor for the website admin, one of the things I really liked and promoted when we were trying to push out the FBTX is for the FBTX app on the phone to not just be the tattle-telling app, right? That's why I like to call it, because it's my tattle-telling app. But they have a place on there for the events. So what I've kind of pushed towards residents is be sure you have that app, because you can always go to the app and then hit on events. And I think what it does is it links to our website, our calendar the calendar link.
Right.
And so I would just encourage, making sure that is a seamless coordination between those two, instead of us having another. Because right now the app situation is getting outrageous.
Right.
Everything I've shopped for, every
Right.
website I visit wants me to download a whole
Right.
nother app.
You want to buy milk? There's an
Right.
app for that.
There's an app
Yeah,
for that.
right.
So us utilizing, because I know a lot of website designers, I'm facing that right now. He's like, oh, you need an app. And I'm like, no, I don't want another app,
Right.
no more apps. But we have one.
To use the one we
have.
have,
The
right.
FBTX.
Yeah.
And so us, making sure that that's a seamless coordination whenever we do bring on that website administrator, I think it's going to be key. It would be key.
That's a great point. And when you think about it, that's almost, I wouldn't say a full-time job, but that's certainly time-consuming to add to one calendar all of the things we have programmed at the library, at the rec center, at the branch connection, here, government events. That calendar becomes very full very quickly, and it's very time-consuming to add and delete content as we go through each year. It's stunning when you think about how much people may want to access on one calendar. So, but
That's so true, and that's why having a social media person just for City Hall, I don't see that as a problem, because there's no way. Social media is the most time-consuming thing I have ever dealt with ever, and I don't have all of these different amenities that I'm trying to coordinate. So having someone that handles social media for for City Hall, for Parks and Rec, for library, for all of those places makes perfect sense, because there's no way one person could keep up with that.
Right.
I mean,
But we need to-
mind-boggling. But we just need to make sure that they're
work together.
coordinating
Right.
and working together,
Right.
and that they're cross-sharing everything.
Right.
And then that way, if you are only subscribed to, FBTX, or you're only subscribed to the historical park or whatever, you're still seeing those
Right.
updates come through,
Right. And there's
those feeds. and
similar
those
branding.
algorithms. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Agreed.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Just to concur, I just pulled up calendar of events on FBTech Connect, and it doesn't render very well, and you have to scroll down. So it's that user experience
Right.
that hopefully the professionals that we contract with can tell us a better pathway to work with our vendors, to work with the providers for those services, so we can make it easier, and so that it comes up in the form factors that are
Right.
necessary. If you're doing it from your desktop or your iPad or
Right.
your mobile device, it just makes it so much easier. We're so now in tune to seeing it on the first view, just scrolling
Yeah.
just down.
That's a big ask.
That's a
Just
big-
scrolling. Right.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Right.
And so we have to make sure that
Yeah.
we're thinking that way.
Right.
But Tracy's point about coordinating all the events, and I know in seeing some of the event calendaring, a lot of times the date that the event was added sometimes is more prominent than the event date itself.
Right.
I've seen that in the website. So there's, how much are we showing?
Right.
Versus how much do we need to show?
Right.
And so it's those type of facets that really someone needs to dig into, and we're hopeful that these new roles will address many of those problems. And I see this as something that we'll have to have, perpetuity. This is, you said it earlier in the presentation, there's so many different platforms, and there'll be another one probably
Right.
tomorrow
It's the world we live in.
that
now.
will take off,
Right.
and that we need to go on.
The good news is it's not new. We don't have to invent this. The technology is there.
Correct.
We just have to adapt it for us.
Correct. Very good.
I am waiting for your next TikTok. I'm waiting for you to see you on TikTok so I can follow you.
Okay.
And I know you've got a dance for me.
I'm trying to get, I think there's a police department push-up challenge that we might, and I heard there's a fire department mustache challenge maybe that we might be suitable, might be. Oh,
It's like Brian Beasley has
you heard it here. You heard it here.
Nice. All right. Well, Jeff.
All right.
Any other questions that we have? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jeff.
Thank you.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the conclusion of the departmental discussions, and we are now at council discussions and directives. And so, John, I'm going to ask, do we have any of these that are following any presentations or
There,
kind
at
of
this point, these
discussion
are,
points?
none of these are presentations. These are all topics that have been brought up by this group. The water and sewer
Sure.
rebate was something
You've
we
answered the
baked into the budget. The tax rate discussion, I think, is something everyone wanted to discuss. Neighborhood investment program to include lights, medians, entrances. We've talked about tech stock cleanup areas. We've talked about homelessness and the shopping carts and things like that, what can be done there. The residential essential repair program, we started a program last year with ARPA funds for seniors. It came in very handy during the wind event. We used all of that money to assist with, and the thought was it's going to go away this year. And one of the things we determined is there weren't just seniors that were really in need, and is that something that we want to look at? So the floor is open, and I don't know if you just want to go at these by topic or if you just want to go by council member and have them kind of go through what's on their list.
That's a fair point. I think that we've listed these, so I think we have the opportunity to at least start with these and just go through this list. And then if others have things we want to add, we can add those as we go along. And then perhaps in the hour or so that we expect Robert, well, maybe 45 minutes that we expect Robert to be back, he can add to that conversation. But let's walk through the 5 or 6 that we have right here and see where that wants to take us. So anyone would like to start?
I know, Sherelle, you and I talked about yesterday as far as with the water rebate and what a brilliant, I think that is a brilliant way to present some relief to our residents, specifically those that are going to be most impacted this year with inflation and with the downturn in our economies. Walk me through, because I know you had I think you had a slide for me. I want to see a slide. I want to see. You know how much I love it when you make me like you did my little graphic with the dollar bill. Oh, I love it when you do that for me. But I would like for you just to walk us through what impact does that have on our budget? What do we need to know going into approving our budget? What we need to do in order to allow that to be something that we can extend to our residents?
Okay. Let me start by trying to explain it here to our council members, to the public. There were a few facts that were discussed during my presentation. One of those is that 1 penny, one side of the penny in terms of the revenue to the city is about $860,000. The other side of the penny in terms of tax savings to residents is about $26 and some change, okay? And the reason for that, that disconnect, that 1 penny basically shakes out to be about a quarter for a resident, gets back to what we've always talked about in that commercial to residential break. So one side of that coin, in that we're 75% commercial, is a great thing, as you heard Marty from Hilltop come and talk about, and how that presents stability in our property tax base. The other side of that is, if you impact that tax rate, 75% of it is going in a direction that's not necessarily hitting the residents in the way that we want to provide relief. So the thought process is that we got other ways we can do that. One of those is through the water rates that are assessed to residents. There is a bill rate structure for commercial, and there's a separate structure for our residents. So the proposal is that every resident has a base charge to their bill. That base charge right now is $22. The proposal is to cut that base rate in half. So that would be direct savings throughout the course of this year and a one-time reduction of that charge to kind of help a resident systematically save that amount. $11 by 12 months, $132. Everybody still with me? So we've already said that $26 is what a resident would get on the tax rate. And I have slides, I can show them to you. Y'all said you didn't want to? So I'm going to see if I can walk us through this. So we already said that about $26 is 1 penny to the resident. So if we are offering, in lieu of that 1 penny, if we are offering something that is 5 times that amount, that's how we arrive at that, the 132 being about a 5-cent savings to the resident. We're able to send that money where we intend for it to go through the opportunity for this water rate reduction, whereas we would not be able to send that money where we intended for it to go through a tax rate decrease. One other thing that I think is important to note with respect to reducing the tax base, reducing the tax rate. There are a lot of cities that are considering this. I mean, this is budget season, and you hear it in the news. This one and that one is considering a tax rate reduction. First thing to consider, the first thing I think as a financial professional who deals with this is, I don't know their situation. I don't know what financial levers, pressures, opportunities, et cetera, that particular city had. It would take me a second to look through their financial records and see, what enables them to do that. The other thing that I note is that in some situations where some communities are offering a 1 cent, 2 cent, 5 cent reduction on the tax rate, what you can see in the way that that is discussed and disclosed in their community is that a 1 cent, a 2 cent, a 5 cent reduction, because you remember my slide from yesterday where I showed you that basically everybody in our area is dealing with, explosive changes in their valuation. We believe those will settle out in the coming year, but what is happening is a 1 cent, 2 cent type reduction is something that maybe a city could consider, but by the time it makes it to a resident's property tax bill, it's going to be almost fully offset with the increase in valuation. So what I'm explaining is that those types of reductions that you actually could make to the tax rate, by the time it gets where you intended for it to go, it's not as effective. What we're trying to propose is something that will be effective and that will go where we intend for it to go. I said that was the last point. Not true. One more point that I wanted to make about that is we also see in some of the cities, the budgets and the process where some cities are in this process now. I see some cities considering a reduction in their tax rate, 1 cent, 2 cent, 5 cents, something like that. And I also see an increase in the water utility, the sewer, the something or another, right? That's why it's dangerous when you pick and choose and you say this one's doing it, that one's doing it, because you got to look at the whole shebang and understand what all enables them to do that, what all their financial pressures are as they consider that. One more piece that's relevant. In order to take away the full impact, you remember my slide where I explained that the average property, based on the average property value, about $274 was the increase in property tax. In order for us to take that all away, to reduce the tax rate enough to remove that full impact, we're talking about 10.5 cents. And remember, we started this conversation by saying on one side of the coin it's reduction to help people and residents. The other side of the coin is that number equates out to about over $8 million. I had it calculated out, it's in one of these slides. But so in order to fully take that burden away, you have to make some dramatic changes within the city. And we've all had this conversation about how much police and fire, public safety, our parks, et cetera, all of these things mean to us and make our community vibrant. So those are the facts I have.
Thank you, Sherelle. Omar, go ahead.
Sherelle, I just had a question. So I appreciate the explanation. Would it work the same way for people who are in apartments, townhomes, condos, or any structure that would be of like kind?
Okay, apartments, those individuals that live within those apartments don't pay property tax. So the property tax is borne by the commercial entity of the apartment. So those particular things, the rate would not apply to because those are commercial entities, and typically many apartments, the individual property owners take care or subsidize some portion of that anyway because it's on shared meters. Condos, if they're individually parceled and individually metered and they have their own water account, it does apply to them, this opportunity that we're discussing.
And then townhomes, those are likely separate.
They're-
I've never lived in one, so that's what I'm asking.
They're typically individually metered.
Thank you.
Okay, so Sherelle, how did that impact, because when we talked yesterday, I said, is this built in, this decrease, is this built into our budget for this year?
Okay.
So is it built into this budget? Is this budget based on us extending that deduction?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. That's all I need.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we didn't have to go in and make some hard
No,
choices.
the way that we factored it in, I was going to explain that. The way that we factored it in, so during my presentation, when I hit on the utility portion, the enterprise fund portion of what's all going on with the budget, what I presented to you in terms of the revenue and the expenditures is if we did nothing, okay? If we left it alone, if we didn't take this option. Where you can see that amount show up is a $1.1 million amount that shows up in your appendix section. So we wanted to allow for conversation amongst our council to figure out if this is a direction of consensus before we bake that into all of the different accounts that would cause that to come to fruition.
Okay, okay.
Richard?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Sherelle. I support this approach. I like it. I like the idea that it's more beneficial to residents. I understand the calculation. We're going to give back to the residents an average of $132 over the course of next year. The place where I'm a little bit conflicted is, I think Farmers Branch is in a bit of a unique scenario. We have 75% of our revenue comes from commercial, right? And they also pay a water bill, and they pay taxes and add to our revenue. So I'm conflicted with saying, hey, thanks, and then giving all the benefits back to our residents. So if I'm missing part of the story here, how do we say thank you to our businesses in this process? Like we're saying, we know residents need some relief, because frankly, businesses need relief. A number of them do as well.
Yeah, and I'll take this first part. Our businesses are really blessed with a great business environment here, and they get a really good deal at Farmers Branch. We don't have impact fees. There's a lot of things that we do that make it easier for businesses to do business, and including police and fire. As I mentioned, economic development's not a department, it's an effort. And we have a very robust retention program, and when we talk with companies and we find out what their needs are, a lot of times those are concerns with safety, And we'll have our fire department, our police department going over and training with those folks. They inspect every business every year. And some of them are like, well, this, y'all were just here, but we want to make sure you're not going to have a problem. I talk to businesses all the time. I have not had one business say, I need relief. They're saying we're doing good. We are really making money in this market. Our residents are the ones that are really feeling the punch. And that's what we tried to do. And y'all may have a different experience than I have, but I would submit, I probably talk to businesses more than anybody in the city. I have not heard one person say, I need relief. I've heard everybody say, we're having a hard time finding people.
Right.
And if I can add as well, there also is funding for, and we spent some time talking about our economic development expenditures, planned expenditures. So just bear in mind that within this budget, it includes a planned expenditure of about $2.85 million to assist businesses as they are coming into this community. There is funding set aside to think about those businesses as they're making a home within Farmers Branch as well. Another factor to consider, and this is kind of along the lines of what John has just mentioned, that businesses tend to be better capitalized than individuals, which kind of speaks to why from a regulation and from a rating agency perspective, they really do like to see that 75% because they know, that property tax number is solid with that level of commercial activity, and that is because they also know that businesses tend to be well capitalized.
I remember when we implemented the stormwater fee, and we were having listening meetings, and boy, there was a lot of folks that were really upset about the stormwater fee. It's not fair, I'm being taxed for rain. We held one just for businesses, and we had a number that came, and they all said, I just need to know what the number is. We pay this everywhere else we do business. And so they're fairly well suited for this, and they do a good job of forecasting. Again, we're hearing from our residents that we need help, and we felt like this was a meaningful way to do that.
Well, and Cheryl, let me just ask, or John, you may know as well, I know from as a business director in Farmers Branch, I know where I'm hurt more on my property taxes, and it's not on my business tax. It's on my individual value. Those valuations went up significantly more in my home resident than it did in my business property. That increase was significantly different. So it was significantly smaller on the commercial side than what it was on the residential side. So that's why when I saw that, because as a business director here, I am very pro-business. I mean, I would like to have some favors too. But when we're talking about property tax relief, I know where that impact of that substantial increase came to, and it was not on business property, it was on the residential property.
That's a great point, and if you think about it, the DCAT is going to value the appraisals based on sales. We're in a smoking hot housing market, so there's houses selling and selling and selling. Each one of those establishes a new comp. You don't typically see businesses sell, right? They own them, and there may be a tenant that leaves and another one comes in. But there's not a lot of actual business property that's selling, so it just kind of incrementally goes up. Whereas a house is like, this house was $200,000, and there's a house in the neighborhood that sold for $400,000, and then one for $450,000, and one for $500,000, one for $600,000, and it's like, hey, this is the comp now.
Yeah.
And so that's why residential valuations are going up so much, and not so much for business.
So I want to touch on, optics and communications, because Cheryl, as you said, you can't look at other cities and say, well, hey, this city and that city and this city, they're all lowering their tax rates. What you're going to see in the news is Dallas is lowering their tax rate, or Richardson's lowering their tax rate, but they're not going to come out and say, hey, Dallas is raising their water rates. They're not showing you the other side where there might tend to be some offsets or even making the tax reduction not worth it. So that's going to make communication to our residents critically important, because they're expecting a traditional tax rate reduction, and that's what they understand. So I see Jeff may be coming through. He's part of our communication process.
He's coming back.
So
Just hit the bat phone.
Every time he hears the word communications, he comes around. It's going to be so important for residents to get this in order for them to get behind it. And so I think that's something we as a council need to be thinking about moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I also experienced that, property tax increase in my 38%, but luckily we were capped at a 10% increase. So there are some other pressures that are outside at the state level that added to that. And so our new, going forward, our ceiling will become our new floor, and we don't want to shortchange ourselves in the long run in making sure that we're able to supply these services at the cost levels that are being discussed, maintaining and putting in new apparatus and putting in new infrastructure. These all cost money, and we saw that we're in the infrastructure with Mark Bentley here yesterday. We saw that we have lots to do. And so I want to make sure that, the residents are getting addressed. The fact that our sales taxes, while we thought, pandemic would crater things, we have seen that not to be the case, although we all recognize there was a dip, but it didn't crater, and it is now returning. So this idea that businesses are still doing well is proven by the numbers. That's, you can't argue with that. And so this idea that there are economic development ideas, I did struggle with this same concept of business versus residents, and we want to be fair. But there's a different perspective as a business. Tracy's made that point from the dais here, and we know others as well. We're meeting the needs where we can. There's a trade-off, and it's hard to make some of these trade-offs, but I think we're doing it in the open, and we're doing it reasonably. And so I'm very supportive of this creative idea that gives the money back, gives money back, not the money, gives money back to the residents, because we know of the overall pressures that the environment that we're operating in have caused. And I think it's the right way to do a balance between providing the services and providing the needs. So that's where I'm at.
I just wanted to add one thing as well. This environment that we're in with SB2 is so tricky. I included a slide yesterday to show you how every year that no new revenue rate gets skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. That's the base. That's the base. That once this increment, we have a year or two left with this tax increment, but once that is gone, then what you, from a strategy perspective, what you want to avoid, if you can, is prematurely lowering that base, because there may come a time when you have to, and you've already dropped, the tax rate in a situation where you might have had other opportunities or other ways to be able to provide some economic relief in the targeted way that we hear you as council members saying that you want to do. So what we sought to do is hear each of you with desires to make sure that the residents were helped and benefited, and we sought to try to do that in a smart, in a financially surgical type way.
Sherelle, I just have one question that kind of popped into my head, and maybe you've addressed it, so I apologize if you've already done so, but is this a fixed rate? So, like in property taxes, the more expensive house you have, the more you pay in taxes, the less expensive, the less you pay. So I'm wondering if the similar consistency exists with this water savings.
So I talked about that every residential customer has a $22 base rate on their bill. And another reason why we like the approach of reducing the base rate is because we want to be good stewards as well of our water resources as well. And so by reducing that base rate, it allows everybody an opportunity, regardless of how much or how little water you consume. And what it also does is, by going in and reducing the base rate, it does not incentivize overuse of water. Because beyond that base rate, you know, based on how many thousands of gallons property a resident will use per month is what the bill, your water bill is based on. So the consumption portion of the bill remains the same. We don't want to incentivize behavior that's going to make us not good stewards of that precious resource. And so the base rate approach is going to give everybody that opportunity without regard for how expensive or not expensive their property is.
So I want to walk through the math, just to make sure that I understand, and for everyone that's watching can kind of walk through it with us, because there's a number here I don't think we've mentioned yet, but we've come close to it. So if we lowered our current tax rate 5 cents, okay, that is worth, if 1 cent is $26 to the resident, then 5 cents is $130. However, 75% of that belongs to commercial. Is that right?
No, the 26 is after the 75.
The 26 is what
26
will go
is
to
after
the
the 75.
Yes.
Yeah.
So think about it this way. If I'm saying that 1 penny, you know, turns out to be $26 to an individual, that meant that the other 75 went to business on the property tax rate. You see what I mean?
Yeah, okay, all right. Then my math won't work. Where I was trying to go is not going to work. Well, so I'm just trying to say that if we lowered the tax rate 5 cents, homeowner would get this. Instead, if we do the water bill credit, they get that. So we're really talking about the same number.
Right.
It's just that we're going to do it through the water bill and not kind of shoot ourselves in the foot this year with a tax rate decrease, planning for future.
Here's why we prefer not, I'm not on. Here's why we prefer not to do it through the tax rate. Because in your example, you're right. 1 cent on the tax rate is $26 to a person. Mm-hmm. So 26 blown out 5 times puts you in that $130 range. Right. I'm basically trying to say there's another way to get at that $130, and that is through a credit. When you offer a tax rate reduction, it goes everywhere. It goes to commercial, it goes to business, individual, it goes everywhere. But we have multiple different bill rates, we always have, that are set up to make sure that business and commercial within our water system are treated, accordingly.
Okay, all right, very good.
Another way of looking at that too is if we did have a 5 cent rate reduction, that would be for everybody. That'd be about $4 million.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Out of our budget, which we would have to really do some soul searching. This is a little over $1 million out of our water fund, which we have the capacity to do.
So step back and think of it this way. 25-75. That's how we can do this instead of spending the $4 million. That's how we can do this, spending roughly in the ballpark of about $1 million. That's how the math works.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that's where I was trying to get that 4 million, 1 million.
Yeah,
piece.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Michael?
Yes. I think this way that you've described it and it's been presented, I think it makes a lot of sense because, with the 3.5% that's going to kick in, you talked about the SB2, and we don't know what's going to come out of Austin down the road in a couple of years. I would hate for us to, in some way, handicap ourselves or disadvantage ourselves. And we certainly don't want to go out and say, well, we want to increase your water rates, we want to increase the tax rate. So I think this makes a lot of sense, doing it through the one-time rebate, that it gets us where we want, it gives people relief, and we also know we have an awful lot of folks in town who are seniors, and so they have a fixed income. You know, you hear in the news now talk about recession, this and that and the other, high inflation. You listen to any advice, oh, we'll go out and get a gig job, we'll go get another job. Well, a lot of folks can't do that, and this gives them some tangible relief, whereas if we cut the tax rate a penny, who's going to even notice that down the road? But they'll see, oh, you know, 130, 140, whatever dollar relief right now, and I think that's the better way to do it.
Another thing to consider for seniors, so Ben did a study after we did our, increased our exemption to $100,000 for seniors and disabled, and we looked at every city in Dallas County and said, now that we have this, what would that equate to? And I think we were the absolute lowest, or maybe one might have been a little bit lower out of the entire county now. And a 1 cent tax reduction to a senior, the majority of our seniors will not pay taxes this year. With that $100,000, based on the average value of a senior's home, the majority of our seniors will not pay any city taxes. So a 1 cent reduction on something you're not paying anything on has no impact at all.
Excellent point, John, thank you. And Sherelle, I'm going to share one of the questions that I asked of you, and you were so kind to give a reply back. My question is, what is the annual average residential water bill in Farmers Branch? The answer is $94.34. So this is impactful. Correct, that's one way to look at it. More than a month free, cutting it, you know, significantly, you know, $11 out of that 94. So this is 15-16% on an average monthly bill. I didn't do the math, I'm just doing it in my head. But that's impactful, and I think it needs to be shown, to Richard, your point, communicated well, and you can see it from different vantage points and how meaningful that this could be.
Cheryl, I know you can make us a really neat graphic that we can share. And maybe that includes the dogs. I think you should
I'm going to need to hear from a few people other than on this dais that they want to see Baxter and Shelby in an actual water bill detail.
So I just wanted to, so there's something that I'm kind of struggling with, and it's just that it's not a rate that is variable and aligns with the price of somebody's home like a normal tax rate would. As a planner, I try to think ahead and try to at least get a sense of what I think the residents might say, and I can almost hear the Mercer Crossing community being upset that, well, this really wasn't I can hear them saying that this is not the tax decrease that they were wanting, that other people may have benefited more, and I can understand that. So I'm looking to you for a little bit of guidance and maybe explanation.
Okay,
right?
Let's talk about it. So when I think about what our average property value is, we're over $300,000 on average property value. I'm going to venture to say that the majority of the properties in the Mercer Crossing area are at that or greater, in terms of the assessed value of those properties. So what this actually means is that the amount of tax that 1 cent reduction would make for them would be even less, because they're carrying more valuation. So what this is doing is providing some specific relief to them that is actually making its way to them. I don't know a different way to explain it, but and I know that people want to see a tax rate reduction. I get it. I'm a property taxpayer myself, but with the understanding that, number one, you're not going to put your hands on 75% of what we would offer you, number one. And number two, through that tax rate reduction. And number two, in order to provide true relief to offset the valuation, we would have to do something catastrophic. So regardless of if we offered them a half cent, a 1 cent, a 2 cent, they're probably not going to feel it. It's because the property tax amount is still going to go up for them because the valuations are so great. The valuations are particularly great in that area because you got movement. So I would just, and I'm happy to, we can work together because I really do believe that this is a great, a well thought out approach.
And don't get me wrong, I think this is a fantastic
Yeah,
idea.
I think this is a well thought out approach to
I'm
be
just
able
trying
to
to
send the money where it
be
needs to go.
yeah, the way I kind of prepare is I'm like, okay, if someone were to ask me a question about this or be in support or be not in support, I want to feel really invested in it so that I can stand behind it and say, you know what, this was a great decision and here's why. So I'm trying to maybe build my arsenal, so to speak, right? And David, I know you have some homes in the Brookhaven area which may share similar value to Mercer Crossing. I don't know what sense of a pulse you may
So
have
does
in that
three.
area to maybe share about what you think their response may be to this.
We'll all hear this.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter what district, all of us will hear this. And so you're right. But as I've said in conversation with Sherelle, this is a math problem. This is a huge math problem that people have to understand. And I'll go back to what Tracy said a moment ago, having a slide, having the dollar bill sliced up, showing a water drop, however you want to show this, is impactful. And we just saw with Jeff's team, the great the great video that they showed. This is important because if we choose to do the tax as we've labored here, we're losing a lot more. And so that's bad. And I can't imagine any homeowner in Brookhaven, and I can think of a number of folks that will be, rapping at my door or sending me emails, and that's fine. But the negativity of doing a tax decrease is more impactful to millions of dollars. We've just heard this.
Right. Yeah, no. And
$3 million in the lurch. And this has been the challenge that I've heard, and I've said this before, many, they have a lower tax rate, and they have, the one that I hear the most is Highland Park, 22 cents on the dollar.
The valuation.
Well, their average home value is 1.4 or 1.6 million dollars. Okay, so you're going to pay more taxes living in Highland Park at 22 cents than you're paying in Farmers Branch at 58 and some change. It's where we decided to live, and there are a multitude of reasons why. So that is just the bottom line. And I think we're making prudent decisions with the dollars that we have. We've heard that there's money in the water fund for this, and it doesn't impact the services that we're trying to provide. We're adding police, and we're supporting our fire, and we're looking at the infrastructure needs. So that's the kind of discussion that I'll have with Brookhaven folks and the people across my district on why we're making and proposing this. And guess what? We're going to have at least 2 opportunities that those fine folks can come here and speak at the public hearing. And I will tell you that I've said this 1,000 times, public hearing is a good place to voice your opinion, but you know how to reach me, you know how to reach each and every one of us up here in the council, and I'll answer and entertain those questions, and I've done that in my entire tenure up here, and I will continue to do that. So I'll have those conversations, and I open that up for everyone.
Yeah, no, and I, by no means am I suggesting that we throw this plan away and go back to revisiting the other one. I would just kind of just expressing kind of what I was feeling, and I don't know that there is a solution. Maybe the discussion I'm hearing is like, you know what, there really isn't a solution. A savings is a savings, right? And so I thought it'd be prudent of me to at least mention what my concern was, and then talk about it amongst us.
So this also takes me back to the discussion about prudent financial management, fund balance, target reserves, understanding your business. All of these things are factors in why we have the ability to make these types of decisions. I'm thankful to you as a council, to past councils for making, for backing those wise financial decisions that enabled us to be in a position right now to say, you know what, our target is $2 million on the water sewer fund. We've made some good steps. We actually can give this 1.1 in this format back and still be above our target and make sure that we are still exercising that good stewardship of those dollars and that particular fund. So it's like you have to play the long game with this financial management. And we've done a really good job of positioning ourselves to be able to respond in this way in this year.
Michael?
Yes, just wanted to go back to a previous point that I made about just retaining our financial flexibility going forward and also being prudent and judicious with the dollars we have. And one way, perhaps, Omar, that you could, there's other ways to look at it, but someone who's got, say, a $300,000 house and $1 million house, it's going to mean different things to them if they get a half a penny or a penny decrease in their taxes. And maybe one way to think about this is giving everyone $140, $50 one-time water and sewer rebate. Everyone's being treated equally. And we all know $100 means something to certain family or individual, and it means something else or is irrelevant to someone else. And I think also from your presentation yesterday, Sherelle, I think you had the two extremes of a home in Farmers Branch that's being built that's going to be worth $9.5 million, and the lowest was one worth $90,000. Well, so that's kind of the two extremes, but we're being fair, we're being equal, and treating everyone the same, regardless of where you live, and the valuation of your property. And to get the one-time relief, and again, they get it immediately, and they would see that. And for the example that David had, or that the average bill for water sewer is $94, so we get to the $140, it's almost like a month and a half, of relief. But there's different ways to look at this and approach it, I think. But I think it's reasonable and it's prudent to do it this way for the reasons I've stated about protecting our financial flexibility going forward. And as to your point, yeah, we all do benefit from previous councils and prudent financial and fiscal management. Yeah.
So the way that I'm thinking about this in my mind is that the benefit to the resident is the same whether we do a tax rate or a water bill credit. The cost is substantially different for the city. Correct. Right? So it's either we pay $4 million in a tax rate decrease or $1 million through our water sewer fund. It may be helpful in our communication, and I know this is down the road a little bit, to include the tax rates of the surrounding cities as a comparison, because still Farmers Branch, even keeping the same tax rate, is right at or below the surrounding cities. And we commonly like to compare ourselves to Richardson. Still haven't found their proposed tax rate for next year, but Carrollton right there with us. Dallas is actually reducing their tax rate to 74.5 cents, 75 cents. So, Richardson last year was at 61.5 cents. So still, Farmers Branch is showing we're doing a whole lot more with less in our tax rate. So that should be resonated in our communications. Sherelle, you mentioned earlier about the sensitivities around SB2. Can you just kind of give us a high flyover of what you're referring to there?
Yes, thanks for that question. So Senate Bill 2 is now in effect, and what it basically requires us to do is each year we calculate what's referred to as a no new revenue rate. That rate takes into consideration the increase in valuation in your area. It does do a couple of things to remove certain things, like if you have a new property, new construction that comes into your area during that calculation year, it removes that, because what it's trying to do is say, what is the base for how much revenue you brought in last year, and so what is the change in the tax rate in an increasing environment of valuation? What is that tax rate that is required for you to bring in the same amount of revenue as what you brought in the previous year? And so in the situation that we're in now with property value rates, you know, honestly, I think we're at the first part of this starting to calm down. I'm just hearing from my real estate friends that, you know, the bidding wars are starting to slow down in terms of getting properties, et cetera. And so this particular thing, in an environment where the valuation is increasing, it will cause you to lower your tax rate so that you achieve the same amount of revenue as the previous year. So what I was trying to explain in my previous comment is you have to really think about if you want to lower that tax rate in a situation where you have other financial levers you can pull, because basically what you're doing is you're handicapping yourself for several years to come, because it's very difficult to get whatever that base is back.
I think that's really, really important for residents to understand. The challenge is it's a very complicated, it's a very complicated item.
If I showed you the calculation, it's worse than any tax form. It's about 5 or 9 pages long of how you calc it.
So Jeff, we're going to need a video
Cartoon.
on SB2. It is. This is the piece that we're struggling with, and that is the big determining factor in which path we're taking with giving back to residents. And I think it's very important that they understand that. So somehow, some way, we've got to communicate with residents what that means in this process for us.
Good point. Other discussion here on water and tax rate, because we can now perhaps say that we've touched on both. Yes. Further discussion there? If not, anything on the neighborhood investment program?
Can someone summarize sort of what we should be looking at there on that one?
Sure. So, as I've spoken with various council members, and we had talked about at one point contemplating a park bond, right? There had been some discussions about what that might look like. And I think the collective wisdom was we're going through a comp study, and that will probably help inform that. But what we really need, and we've recently invested quite a bit in our park system. We're going to see a new signature park open. We are, we're going to have a barn at the historical park. We're investing in the branch connection. We're investing in phase 2 of the recreation center. There's been a lot of investment recently in parks. And the thought was, what are we doing for neighborhoods? Because our neighborhoods need some help too. They need help with updated lighting, maybe some entrances to help slow down traffic. We are starting to get more and more issues with homelessness, and nobody has really figured that out. I think we've been brainstorming about some things we might be able to do to at least curtail that. So is that, as we're talking about the budget, is that an opportunity for us to look at prioritizing some things there? I know the mayor has talked about wanting to improve medians, and he's mentioned a couple of areas where, it just looks vacant here where there's not a median, there's not kind of a signature entrance into some of our areas. And those are some things that they come with a price tag, but we could probably figure out some of that and at least start a plan of this is what we can tackle this year, and then in future years, what would that plan look like? So anyway, I'll just kind of open the floor. Councilman Jackson, I think that's been a drum that you've been beating quite a bit too, so perhaps we start with you.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate the summary, and it was for everyone's benefit. My whole thought process behind this is, we've spent a lot of money on parks. You just mentioned that. We've recently considered spending more money on parks, and we love our parks. I'll say it 1,000 times. I probably already have at this point. But given the times that we're in, the money that we have, we're not in bad shape at all. We're giving back to residents in a meaningful way through their water bill. I think it's important for us to focus our spending attention into the neighborhoods where residents have a more direct impact of the dollars that they're paying in and that we're then spending on their behalf. And so, as you mentioned, lighting, slowing traffic, whatever that means or does, there are some neighborhoods that have speed humps to slow traffic. And I know that that's a touchy subject, but there may be other neighborhoods we might need to look at putting speed humps in. Stop signs, lights, flashing lights, slowing traffic is a big deal for some streets in particular. And so I would suggest that those are priority. I think that our focus on police and fire, police specifically, and increasing the patrol that we have on the street and the presence that we have on the street is going to help us have a more visible direct impact in the neighborhoods with residents on curtailing crime, whether it's homelessness, broken down cars, you name it. Aside from no one told me that meeting was happening at City Hall, I hear from residents, we don't see our police as much as we used to. So I think that a focus on that budget's going to help us a lot in that area. Medians, wonderful. Improving sidewalks, putting in sidewalks, again, whatever creative ideas that the council and the residents can come up with, I'm all ears, we're all ears. But I just think that the mindset needs to be toward the neighborhoods.
Thank you. So I agree with what Richard's saying. When I walked my district, and I walked pretty late and delivered signs pretty late. And one thing that I did notice was there's not a lot of lights out there, and there's a lot of cars, particularly around on Valwood. It's really, really, really bad. It's really noisy, and even walking on the sidewalk with cars parked along the street, I felt like it was really unsafe. I felt like, of course, when you hear cars that speed from one stop sign to the next, it sounds scary, and I was like, one of these days I'm going to get hit. And so I can only have a small understanding of what it feels like to actually live in that neighborhood. And other people shared other stories with me. They said, people, because they added the stop signs on Valwood, people have used Springvale and Brandywine and some other streets that are long as kind of workarounds to not go through the stop signs. So people have sped through there, and some streets have certain curves where they've told me there has been 5 accidents in the past 2 years in this specific house because people speed through there and don't know that there is a sharp turn coming. And so those things that I've heard create a lot of concern for me. And, I always think to myself, what is the number one job that government has? And it's to keep people safe. And I think this goes a long way to promote safe and secure neighborhoods, to address the speeding issue. I don't know that speed bumps are the issue in every single neighborhood, because I know that has an effect on response times. But maybe there's something else. I feel like we have evolved a lot in civilization to hopefully have found some really creative solutions to try and slow down individuals who are traditional speeders. And then whether you're in an old neighborhood or a new neighborhood, streetlights is an issue as well. And And then with the medians, I agree, I've kind of paid a little bit more attention to medians now that it's kind of come up for discussion, and I agree that we can probably do a better job at that. And stop me if I go too far, if this is a different subject, but I also wanted to talk about the medians in Mercer Crossing. Do you want me to go into that right now, John? Do you want me to say it? Okay.
You have the floor, sir.
So, for those who are unaware, the Mercer Crossing area is managed by 2 different HOAs. There is one HOA that manages the entire neighborhood, all the homes and townhomes and condos and so forth, like any other HOA. Then there's a separate HOA that is very unique to this Mercer Crossing area. And from what I understand, it has to do a lot with the history of it. It was a commercial area, and so there was an HOA that managed just 2 streets, the medians on 2 streets, that's Mercer Parkway and Whittington. And there's been a lot of complaints from residents regarding the inconsistency between what our medians look like and what the medians look like on that area, because they're maintained by 2 separate entities. They've also been concerned about the lack of maintenance in those medians, and so what I wanted to kind of bring into discussion is how we might feel about taking over those 2 streets and maintaining those medians. And I think we were working on trying to figure out what the cost would be to take on that venture. But I think continuing on with the same theme of making sure that all communities feel like they're part of Farmers Branch. I know that community in particular feels very separated, and I think having it look just like the rest of Farmers Branch, I think will go a long way. So I kind of wanted to, those are kind of the issues that I kind of wanted to bring up and see if there's anything we might be able to do this budget season.
John, you'll remember our discussions of the Oak Brook
Right.
medians as well. So we have a similar situation on Oak Brook Parkway where the homeowners association is responsible for, I believe, 3 or 4 islands of median, and then the city maintains the remainder of Oak Brook. So that would also fall into this same discussion.
So just in general, what are y'all's thoughts on that? The Oak Brook is an older neighborhood, and, again, they owned their own streets. We did have to come in and help with streets. They have their own utilities. We had to kind of come in and help with that too, just because over time, some of that institutional knowledge wasn't necessarily passed on. Everybody understood it when they first came in, and then the house is sold, and the house sold, and the house sold, and the house sold, and nobody really thinks that they're responsible for some of those things. But those were all deals that were made. That was when that was rezoned as residential, that was kind of the pitch, the developer made is, we'll take care of this. We do give a 40% rebate of city taxes back to that area to kind of help offset PID costs and some other things like that. But by the same token, that was the deal that was made, but we had to deal with Oak Brook too, and we kind of had to step in and help. So what are y'all's thoughts about the city's role in taking over some of those arrangements?
Go ahead.
Sorry. And if I can also add, I forgot to mention one important piece of information. So I've had a meeting with the HOA to kind of talk about just general maintenance and management of the HOA and see what it is, how we can work together to make sure that residents are getting the service that they deserve. And through that conversation, I brought up the medians and kind of inquired about what the balance in their current account looks like, and it's somewhere around $400,000. And they said that they would be willing to provide us a portion or all of it, or what they're amenable to working with us to try and make this work. And so I just want to make sure that I mention that they're willing to work with us. They have some money in the account, and whatever it is that we decide to do, if we decide to move forward to take over those 2 medians, that there's some money there that might help offset some of the costs.
Probably need to figure out the cost and how much
Well, I think they were going to try to get us that information, weren't they?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
probably, just my little financial mind is like,
Yes.
well, how much
How much
revenue
is
are
it?
they talking about? How much cost are we talking? And then figure out if we're close.
Yeah, that's the same from an Oak Brook perspective, you know, and I think we've had, I see Mike in the audience, they have a different electrical, you know, substructure for their lighting. The irrigation is different, all of those. So Mike, you want to come up and add a little bit? Thank you. I appreciate the engagement.
Move forward just in case I was needed. So it sounds great in theory, right? We get in this predicament and we have to have medians maintained. We can barely keep up as it is. We're having issues with our medians right now. Plant material dying when you have harsh freezes, irrigation systems that have leaks. And right now our irrigation system, as you may remember from the Parks Master Plan, is very outdated. And so we don't know when there's a leak until it's very obvious. That's a $1.8 million fix right there. So we're kind of behind, we're stretched thin, so to take on medians, that would be another crew of 2 to 3 people. Brian could give you full salaries of that, but probably salary related, close to $60,000, $70,000 per person. Extra truck at $60,000, and then additional tools that go along with that, and that's ongoing. So it's sizable, it's significant, and it's not something I would jump into lightly, personally.
Again, I think these are all important things to add into the equation, and they don't always make prudent sense. And so, you know, John is right when he says, you know, some of these deals, if you will, and agreements were made years ago, and they don't necessarily get passed down. Doesn't mean that we can't look at them and try to find good answers, but those answers come at a cost, and trying to be frugal and fiscally responsible is very challenging in this regard of, you know, is 4 islands in my neighborhood, 2 whole street medians in Omar's, there's a dollar figure that comes into that, so.
And also keep in mind the crew, that's to maintain them, but we also have an irrigation crew and a chemical applicator crew, and so they're doing what they can do now, so that could even be more. I mean, it's tough to say one set of medians, but you add this set, that set, you know, you're starting to look at more too.
Thanks, Mark.
Can I just add, as we're talking through this year's budget and our concerns for residents with being good stewards and being more frugal, I think, although I completely understand the residents in Mercer Crossing's plight, when you buy into an HOA, you do that with certain understandings and with certain risk. I don't think that it's responsible as a city council for us to get involved on that kind of level with an HOA on privately owned property. There are a lot of HOAs within the city of Farmers Branch, and I think we step into that one, and I think that's like a fire ant bed that we realize there's now 15 others that pop up. And there are legal ways that an HOA can address what they consider are shortcomings on their agreements with their developer and with what those agreements were when they purchased homes and when they purchased into that HOA. And I think that those may be a better way to advise them than to put the city and the taxpayers on the hook for stuff that was never ours. Especially when we're talking about how to be, as we're walking into this downturn in the economy, how we need to be more frugal. And I know that with the West Side development in particular, we're really wanting to invest in some amenities and some safety over there. And so going in and diverting possible funds from those areas in order to accommodate the shortcomings of an HOA agreement on privately owned parcels of medians or whatever their privately owned amenities, I think is dangerous. I don't think it's frugal, and I would rather and I think in the long run, I think that the residents in that area would much rather see the city invest in amenities in that area that we're lacking, like libraries, like parks, like schools, than what it is for us to go in and take over medians and lighting. That's just my take on that.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm going to agree with that entirely. I think it's a very slippery slope for the city to get involved in an HOA. When you build or purchase a home in an HOA, part of that process is that you acknowledge that you've received a copy of that HOA's bylaws, and whether the resident reads or understands them or not is not incumbent upon the city to come back some years later and cover costs that don't belong to us and that really are the responsibility of the HOA. And so that's where it's really important for residents in an HOA to have an effective HOA board and ensure that that board runs that HOA, not just so that we've got pretty green grass and flowers, but that we're also looking ahead and we're identifying and we're planning for infrastructure where the cost can really be a lot more. So I appreciate those comments. I'm going to agree with that.
Do we have anything else to add to the discussion regarding the neighborhood investment program at this point?
Well,
not sure. Go ahead, John.
On that topic, there's not currently a set aside for that program. However, we do have a couple of line items that could be appropriate. One, we do have a neighborhood partnership program. We've talked about that a little bit. It's administered by by our economic development team and their two mascot dogs, and to a degree Mark Bentley, because bag walls also fit into that. We have redone the fence on Wooded Creek with that, and it's very much improved that area. And the rest of that's frankly been spent on some bag walls, but there's $50,000 in the budget that's for neighborhood partnership. I would suggest lighting and some of these things are a neighborhood project. That could certainly be in the budget with that in mind. And we also have some money for entry monument signs, and those are going up and up and up, and it's probably good to just let that sit for a year and let that fund build up a little bit more, but we could certainly take some of those funds towards something like this and look at a plan that we can kind of get behind in terms of, first steps, next steps, and then things for the future that would be, here's where we need to address lighting, here's where we need to look at traffic calming or slowing down traffic, here's some things that we need to do from a median standpoint, and kind of come up with some criteria for where those funds should be expended, but that might be a good use of that.
Do we have funds set aside to repair the
Yes.
one that was ran over on Josie, please?
We had an entry monument hit on Josie, y'all may have seen. And there's a couple of things that are going on. One, I believe there's an insurance claim that we're trying to see if we can get reimbursed for that. The other thing is we're having entry monument blades manufactured right now for Midway. If you've gone out to Midway, I think they've pulled the power there, and we're trying to have those fabricated, so we're having another sign fabricated to replace that one. So I know that's unsightly. We're looking at just getting it taken down, just at least for now. So I think it's the branch signs. It'll just say farmers. We'll have James Lockridge drive by and we'll say that's his, welcome to our city, James.
Well, he's a resident now. Mm-hmm. He stumbles through his address, but he gets it.
What are y'all's thoughts on that approach?
So we already have $50,000 now to start with.
Correct.
Right? And you're suggesting we wait another year?
Well, we have $50,000 in the neighborhood partnership program, and I would think this could be an eligible expense. It's typically some type of a match with the neighborhood where there's something they want to do, and then we come in and kind of match them dollar for dollar, or in that case, I think it was even, did we do like 60 or, I'm trying to remember, 60%? Yeah, so there's kind of a scale, the percentage goes up or down depending on that project, but we could just say for this year, that's going to be, $50,000 is going to be spent on that. on something the council decides in terms of whether it's sidewalks, lighting, whatever. It won't be something somebody applies for necessarily. It may be something that we establish. The other fund was the entry monument fund, and I might suggest perhaps waiting a year to use those funds, and that would give us a little more capacity.
So if I walk through an example, let's say, for example, Myra or Ridge Oak, one of the two streets in my district that have some pretty significant speeding issues in residential neighborhood. Let's say the street wants speed humps. You're saying that the neighborhood may bear some of the cost of that, and then we use some of the funds from the 50,000 for that?
Yeah.
Or is that an item that you would say, that's really more of a city expense? If we wanted medians and flowers and trees, then that's more of a beautification kind of thing, and maybe residents.
We already have a road hump program, so I would say if somebody wanted that, we can go through that normal application process. If they wanted to, like, we want to upgrade all of our lights to LED, and we would like some type of an entrance median to make it a little harder for cars to just come into a neighborhood fast, like Ridge Oak Way would be a good example of that. And we could say, okay, that might be the neighborhood partnership program. If the neighborhood says, yes, that's something we want, and here's the cost associated with that. And I don't know that we would have to have the match part of something like that. It might just be, we have $50,000 for something like that, and we can apply X amount for lighting or medians. I know, Robert, you've talked about some medians on, I believe, on Dennis.
Oh, it was just, I raised my eyebrows because I saw the number for the medians on Dennis. So
Yeah.
50,000 is not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
You might get 10 feet of a median. Maybe that's enough. I doubt it. But.
Right. We could certainly just earmark that money for something like that. And just, we don't have to make a decision today, but we might say, we have $50,000 in the neighborhood partnership program, and our thought is we would like to somehow invest that into sidewalks, lighting, a median, the road humps. We can just, if a neighborhood can just come forward with that request, we have an application process for that.
Yeah. Very good. Michael?
Yeah, when you talk about reserving that 50,000, I mean, what could we get with that? I mean, it's not a lot of money. We're talking about lighting, sidewalks, et cetera. And then second point, to the issue about speeding, that is an issue, and sometimes that changes, from one street or one neighborhood to another. But preceding all of us on council, I know some years ago, not going to go into the details, but some neighborhood or some people in a neighborhood wanted speed bumps, and there was a lot of talk, pros and cons. They put them in, and then after a certain period of time, people wanted them removed, and they were finally removed. And as I understand it, I don't remember the numbers, but the cost of removing them exceeded the cost of installing them, a few years before. So again, people that want to speed, they'll find, oh, well, we can't speed here. Let's go out to Luna, or well, Farmers Branch is cracking down, let's go up to Carrollton. I'm thinking, so it's one thing if people are moving around because of a detour, or, road is being renovated, they'll go in a different neighborhood, but people that want to speed and race, I think they're going to look for those opportunities. But just a cautionary point about the road bumps. There are always pros and cons.
Well, and I know as we go into this comprehensive plan and we're looking at our road,
Mobility.
our complete streets, thank you, my complete streets. That's one of the things that I know that we're going to address. And so I think maybe for speeding purposes and that kind of thing, maybe we save that until we finish this comprehensive plan, and that gives our staff direction when it comes to a budget. Hey, this is where they're going, and that way they can do those traffic studies and say, okay, these are our problem areas. We're going to map this out. We're going to say this is our priority this year. This is our priority over the next 5 years. Because those entrance medians into the neighborhoods, that is such an easy thing. And I know Mark loves it when we say, if we're going to do a project, we can build the cost of that project in when there's a bigger, a further reach, like burying the electrical lines when we're expanding sidewalks. Those, you kind of want to do those together because retro retrofitting something is always worse and more expensive than what it was to address it all at the beginning. And so I think when we're talking about those areas, especially as they're, interest is coming off of Josie, off of Midway, off of Marsh, off of Webb Chapel, you slow all of that, you can slow all that down as we're working on those complete street projects as well. So I think maybe for now that is kind of tabled with the thought that we're going to address that within our comprehensive plan and then give that to staff, and staff can then advise us, hey, going forward, this is how we're going to map this out over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
That makes good sense. Michael, go ahead.
Just briefly, I was just going to say, I think that does make a lot of sense because as we've discussed, as we kicked off that meeting last week out in Mercer Crossing area, the comprehensive plan study is going to be very broad. It's going to look at mobility, traffic flows, all these things in our city. And again, we want to have the maximum input from residents. And that is going to be, a longer process, but it would involve all of these types of issues, safety for pedestrians, bikers, et cetera, as well as traffic flow and things like that. So it sounds like a good idea.
Very good. All right, we'll move ahead. If there are no other discussions on neighborhood, I think we're going to leave it where we had just discussed. Contracts for service and home rehabilitation. Is this the $50,000 that we had with MetroCrest?
Yeah, the residential essential repair program was the MetroCrest program.
Okay.
And that was, we used that was a ARPA funded for 1 year.
Okay.
And I think we kind of found this year that we were very blessed to have that money when we had that windstorm. And the thought was, we don't have the ARPA funds this year, but is that something that we want to find as a priority somewhere in the budget to have something like that? And is $50,000 enough? And I know, Councilman Roman, this was something that was an observation that you had when you were meeting with some folks in your district. When we started finding out, we were able to help a number of very needed seniors, but there were a number of folks who were not seniors that didn't qualify for that program that had a difficult situation. And is that a role for us to play?
Yeah, thank you, John. So, I'm supportive of putting some money into the pot for the senior repair program. And when I met with Tracy Eubanks, he certainly mentioned that with the cost of doing certain things, I think each person could apply for up to $5,000, and he said that that amount wasn't enough to cover the cost of certain things, so they ended up upping it to about $10,000. And so with $10,000, you only get a certain you get to help a certain number of people, very few people with that per year. And so personally, I'm in support of doing it just because I've seen what it's been able to do, particularly in situations where there's a windstorm or something out of our control that really has a really negative impact on the community. But more than that, there are individuals out there who experienced a similar issue that weren't 65 or older and didn't qualify for the senior repair program. And I really felt for them because there wasn't anything that I could think of, or that very minimal things that we could try and help them with. So what I wanted to propose is for a secondary repair program for those who are under 65, and instead of it being a full, apply for it and you can get up to X number of dollars, I wanted it to propose for it to be apply, you can get up to X amount of money, and it's a matching program. The way I sort of rationalize it is if you're not a senior, I guess 65 or older just yet, then you should have the ability to at least generate some funds, but maybe you're just short and there are certain things that are pretty essential for you to do on your home that affect your quality of life and your standard of living, that if not addressed immediately can create some pretty significant issues that continue to set you back. So that's the additional program that I wanted to bring up and see what the other council members thought about that.
Maybe that could be a good use for that $50,000
For this year?
For this year. Since we are investing so much right now in parks and beautification, we're talking about tips and we're talking about, the comprehensive plan and all of that is about neighborhoods and beautifying the neighborhoods and talking about how to do transit, then maybe this year that 50,000 would be great, because I do have, along Omar's same ask, I did talk to Tracy, and he has a huge ask of us this year. As they are anticipating, MetroCrest Services is anticipating moving forward this year with rental assistance and their usual costs. They foresee a huge shortfall. Their numbers that they thought after the pandemic would start to fall have not. They are increasing. And he is anticipating that will continue, and their board is anticipating that will continue. And so their ask, I know Ben's coming, I know he's coming for me.
I've got the information for you all so that we don't have to speculate too much on it.
Perfect.
I know y'all have two liaisons here, so y'all are aware of this, but the rest of the council is not. On Friday, Tracy did reach out to provide this. Make sure y'all have a chance to look at it, consider it as part of the budget discussion. It is a substantial ask.
It's substantial, and I will just say MetroCrest is such a huge partner for us, and so much of their services goes to our residents, goes to our residents in particular. He is asking for the 230,000. If that's not doable, if we can't find that, I know Sherelle's looking at me. I know Sherelle's looking at me. Don't look at me, Sherelle. So with that 50, if we have that 50,000 already, I think that could be a great way to fund those commitments that Omar's talking about. But I'd like to help Tracy out. As I would love to see us help MetroCrest, because they are such a good partner for us, and we have to remember they do for us what a lot of cities have internally in social services that we do not have, and they do that. So I will put that out there.
And then, John, if you would like, we can show you the home rehab program. You can see all the results for that as well, if y'all would like. If that's the desire, y'all can see the impacts. It has run out of money, so the program has ended.
So I think maybe we should talk about each one individually, because we're talking about the senior repair program, we're talking about the new one that I just proposed, and then we're talking about the need that is indicated in this letter for rental assistance. That way we don't get confused.
Absolutely.
So how do you guys all feel about the senior repair program?
We used all of the senior repair funds last year, right? 50,000. And did we have seniors that were turned away?
I don't believe so.
No, we didn't.
We did not, did we?
Based on the criteria, yes, we did have some that were turned away because there were some eligibility requirements. We did modify those as it was a first-time contract. You learn as you go. So the first thing was the projects used to be capped at 5,000. It was moved to 10,000. The second part was removing the deductible component, and that was the first amendment. And MetroCrest has indicated that they did it this first year, but to make it a continuous program, 50,000 is not enough to cover their overhead to also administer the program, because they're doing all the background checks and all the informational checks to make sure they fit the criteria the city had put in place. But it was extremely beneficial, especially during the windstorm. I think we had 4 different households that were impacted by it. And some of these folks, I don't know what they would have done without this program, to be honest, because MetroCrest didn't have the extra money for it. And this made the difference in keeping these folks, some cases, in their homes. They'd been here for 30, 40 years.
Did we turn anybody away for financial reasons or just because they didn't qualify?
It would be qualifications,
Okay.
is my understanding.
Okay.
So I'm aware of the one story where there was a home where the resident went without plumbing for some time. somebody else raised the flag for that person and said, hey, there's a problem, and that program was able to assist them. I understand the shortfall that Metrocrest is expecting with the rental assistance program. I feel like if I had to prioritize these programs, and this is a terrible process because we want to help everyone, right? There's no perfect solution here, is that I would prioritize our seniors that have lived in our city for so long, above rental assistance perhaps. And I realize we've been through some pretty tough economic times, but if the pot of money was only so big and I had to divvy that up, my priorities would be with the seniors that have lived here. If they've lived here that long, they've been paying taxes here, and I would suggest that would deserve more of our dollars than a pretty substantial contribution to rental assistance. But somehow maybe we can find a way to meet some or most of the need in all three areas.
And part of that could be the definition of seniors. I believe it's 65 in this program, but we use that definition differently, such as 50 for like the branch connection, we can increase the scope too.
I'm a senior at the branch connection. So it's a great point, Ben. Yeah, thank you.
So is there a fund of money besides the two that we've talked about? The 50?
You're seeing a lot of people sweating in the audience right now.
So I was just saying to John, okay, what I'm listening for, and when this letter dropped, I was like, okay, now where do I find,
Sure.
So what I'm looking to you as a group with respect to Metrocrest and this additional ask, other programs that we're interested in supporting, is how much are we talking about?
Sure.
And then leave me to go figure it out. And
Sure.
maybe I come back with, okay, here's would you rather this or that, or, et cetera.
So maybe we'll set it at 350 for all three, and then you go in and look what we actually can do, and you come back and you say, I can't do 350, I can do this. And this is where I can pull these funds are. And that would be my other question is, do we have any other, do we have any ARPA funding? Do we have any,
Yes,
not ARPA. And we didn't qualify for CDBG.
Yeah.
So we do have ARPA funding coming in. It's all
planned.
allocated.
It's all
Yeah.
planned, that's
It
my
is.
point, yeah.
But I'm hearing, see, this helps me,
Yeah.
like I feel like a little bloodhound right
Like
now.
if we
What am
could
I
do,
after?
if
What am
we
I
could
looking for?
do, if we can look at Tracy's ask, because I really don't believe that Tracy would ask if, he's an excellent steward, and he has always been an excellent partner with us as far as being careful with how we do. And that's a very long-lasting relationship. That's not, that's not a brand-new program. We've been with them for, we've been partners for a long time. So I would like to at least see if we can meet his ask, as well as continue the funding on the senior program, and maybe we just decrease the age. We started with 65, Omar. Maybe we say, hey, this year we'll make it 50, and then next year we can reevaluate and say, okay, now we just want it to be open for anyone in need.
Okay, let me ask this back. We've gone through the whole budget. We've talked about a bunch of different things. We provided answers to some questions this morning. And one key piece to how I look, what I'm trying to figure out is, with what you got as it sits, are we settled with that as a group? because that helps me to figure out what, if this target is moving, it's hard for me to know where to look. So are we settled with what we got?
I'd still like to see the police and fire salary increase at 10%. We estimated that to be an extra 183 per 1%. So that puts us, you know, for another 3 at
I can get it.
550. We good there?
I'm saying that's why I'm asking this question.
Okay.
It's almost like going to the Waffle House. Now I'm the short order cook taking the order for what we would like to tweak and what we got.
Well, I'm most likely the one to add pancakes to my order.
On that, I think just talking with Brian, we have a 7% increase across the board built in. And this extra 1, 2, or 3, I think we might advocate for as a retention bonus, like a one-time thing, instead of it being salary. Is that? I mean, it's the same dollar amount, but it's not recurring. So it would be kind of viewed as a retention bonus.
Correct. So just from a compensation philosophy, won't reiterate my resume to you guys, but if I were standing in front of the board of Dr. Pepper, that's what I would recommend. I wouldn't recommend putting all that into base pay because we are already, with our philosophy, going to be paying better than the average bear. And in fact, with the 1% more, we're going to be paying better than the average bear. But I am for, and I want to be really clear, I think you have the best and the brightest. I think you have the best and the brightest fire department and PD. And they embrace our culture, some more than others. That's all employees. That's normal. But I would say that yes, you're getting the best bang for the buck. I would be hesitant though to load up a base salary that never goes away, that we add on to that cost another 40% roughly of benefits cost year over year. And then at some point, what I believe would happen, because we're probably not going to ever come back and lower the level of public safety, but you're going to come and ask me to cut 25% of the regular staff, and that will fail. So I'm just being really blatantly honest. I would rather see you put it into a lump sum that you can year over year address, because there's nothing wrong with council saying, Brian, what would you think we should put as a lump sum next year? And I will definitely give you the answer. And I think that 3%, in fact, it's very interesting, Councilman, because my daughter was having oral surgery the other day, and I called John from the dentist and said, I have an idea. It's really creative. It's really out of the box. I said, what if we were to take 4.5 for merit and the 6, at that point we hadn't settled in on 7, the 6% for public safety. And we did that. We asked for that approval, but we took a 3% across the board, not public safety, but a 3% across the board, and put that in a holding spot and asked for those dollars to be as a lump sum to employees during this catastrophic year. And I say it's catastrophic because of inflation and the tight labor market. I can easier sell that to you all with public safety. I recognize that. But again, as I mentioned this morning, I have streets workers that literally can go make $10,000 more right today. They could walk off the job today and go sign a 2-year contract. And yes, they'd walk away from their pensions and that, or their TMRS, and that's meaningful to them. But for the new folks that have come on, not so meaningful because they got a long time to go. So I caution that I would definitely support those dollars. So please, I don't want to be talking out of both sides. I just don't feel like it's right to put it in a base salary.
What if we were able to do something in the middle? Maybe like 8.5%, and then the remainder to get to the 10 as a one-time.
At the end of the day, I will say that you all are our bosses, and you are the stewards of the taxpayer dollars, and we execute against what you ask us to do. And I think it's still the right thing to value the employees. So I'm not going to argue against paying PD and fire. I'm going to argue for that. One, I'm a HR guy, but human resources management is in my title because we protect the entity first so that the employees can have a job. I don't want to come back 2 years from now and have to lay lots of people off because we overspent. So.
My thoughts on this, I think we were given a recommendation based on your background, your history, and facts. I think it's easy for us to sit up here on the dais and say public safety because it's politically, and it can be a political motivator.
Sure.
But I think when we have already recommended overstaffing, correct? We are paying, our standard is to pay 4% over?
5% over.
5% over.
And that's for everybody.
For everybody.
For everyone.
But now we're saying, look, because of public safety, because we understand and we sympathize with the demands of that job.
Yes, ma'am.
And the market, that job market for that job right now. We're going to even go above that and do an additional 2%. I think that's fair, and I think that to just throw more money at it and not look at the rest of our staff or not look at the rest of our needs, as a city whole, I don't think that I could support that. I don't think I could support a 10% when that's, and especially a base salary. It's always nerve-wracking as an employer as well. I'm in this dilemma so hard right now because I can agree to, and it's just a department. It's just it's 3 people. I can agree to a substantial increase, knowing that I'm walking into an economy in a situation, a possible recession. And then what am I going to do 6 months from now when I can't walk that back? I can't take that money back ever. And so I'm going to have to lay people off. And that's even more expensive because I still need those 3 people. I just need them not to be paid that much.
Right.
So I think you made sound recommendations. And Brian, I think you always make sound recommendations to us. And so I think I'm going to trust you and your knowledge of, and I know that Chief Hale, that y'all have those conversations and y'all have come together as a team and said, this is what we need. And I think we need to respect that.
Thank you. I will support, obviously, the direction of our bosses, and I can make the numbers work. I can't speak for the Sherrill side. I can't.
You see, I've even turned the books out trying to figure this out.
I don't bring in the revenue. We do save a lot on benefits, but I can't bring in the revenue.
I appreciate your comments. I assure you that my motivations are not political. We have, first and foremost, our job is public safety. And I'm going to say it time after time, it's public safety, period. And Farmers Branch has the ability, we should have the reputation that we're the best law enforcement and fire department to work for in the Metroplex. And right now, everybody's fighting for those same people.
Correct.
And all of our employees are important. But our fire department and our law enforcement are at the top of the food chain here, right? And I realize that we're across the board offering 105% of market to be competitive.
Now 107 now.
Well, 107 now, but that's not going to be our new standard going forward. We're going to stay at 105.
Yes, sir.
And we're just offering an additional 2 this year, right? So I do believe there's some middle ground. The problem with cash, and I'm in that business as well, it wears off. So a few months later, I get my cash, and I hate my job, hate my boss just as much as I did 3 months ago before I got my cash. So I think there is a balance there.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a balance. Where I would respectfully disagree is the top of the food chain, because at the end of the day, much like Dallas, they don't have fire trucks. You got to have a great fleet department that can put those fire trucks on the road.
Right.
You have to have a great HR department that can keep the culture and the benefits and the pay correct. So we work as a united team. I know it's more public facing, and I would agree with that wholeheartedly, and they are the heroes of the day. I would totally buy into that. Y'all see that I sport the fireman mustache. I love my firefighters. I love my police officers. So I support that, but we are one team. It's one football team. But again, sometimes there's a wide receiver that's paid more than a running back, maybe. So I totally agree with that. But the market kind of drives that. And there's still ways to get to what you're saying. So I would support the mix. I just caution on dividing us, because what does tend to happen, and I can tell you at one time before I got here, and John can correct me because you've been here longer, but probably 10 to 15, before the Great Reset, as employees will say, where we laid off folks, we were probably the best paid in the Metroplex, the whole city, every department. And I've had multiple employees come and state that personally. They've said at one point people wanted to come before council and be recognized. That went away back at the same time as the lawsuit, et cetera, that people are very familiar with, and has now come back, which is a good thing. But we were also the top paid. If your direction is that, I 100% support that. That's holistically, that's whole team. And then the market drives specifically what an HR guy should make, specifically what a finance person should make, specifically what a police officer should make. But we pay everybody at that higher philosophy rate. If that's the direction too, I can certainly buy in HR and culture-wise as your advisor to that, because that's really all I am to you all, is to make that advice.
Well, I just look at this as a problem of we are having such a challenge getting and keeping, particularly law enforcement officers and detention officers.
No, sir. Every
So that's what I'm really.
we have more turnover in other departments than we do in police and fire. So they're higher paid, number one. They're longer to train, so there's a lot more cost involved, a lot more investment. But no, we have other departments that are actually, streets is my worst turnover, period. Mark got up here and kind of said to y'all yesterday, well, my jobs aren't being filled. He's right.
Right. So the last thing that I'll say is that if we as a council so easily can make a decision to fund a $500,000 overrun for paint and lights at a rec center, and we're saying this year we're going to give an extra $183,000 to our police so we can be 1% above everyone else, I just don't feel like that's enough. It's not to. Richardson's giving 6% increases this year. There are other cities that are giving above average increases this year to get police officers and firefighters. So I just need you to understand my perspective here. Is that if we're just a nose ahead, don't expect that that's going to all of a sudden solve our problem.
And I don't, and I would agree with that. I mean, I don't have any issue with when you start to talk about the philosophy of can we spend $500,000 to paint versus investing in people, I'm always going to tell you invest in the people, 100%. So I would totally 1,000% agree with that. I would say that it's doing pay correctly. My team has heard me say this all the time. Yes? Doing pay correctly just keeps people from being ticked off at you. Doing pay incorrectly gets people to leave you and be ticked off at you because, much like you said, that one check happens, life happens, and people take the wife out, take the husband out for dinner, and then the next time you're thinking about what do you get the next time, right? But our culture and the way we invest in people and the way we treat people mean a lot. And so I would put that up against any organization anywhere in the state of Texas, anywhere in the country, for React, for our fire culture under Chief Latimer's lead, our police culture under Chief Hale's lead, and Chief Siegel, et cetera, and Chief Stokes. And then our leadership under John. I would put that up against anybody in the Metroplex strongly. I'm passionate about it, much like Chief Latimer was yesterday about the team. So I agree in always investing in people, and But I would say that you're right, the 1% doesn't do enough. The culture and investing in people and making people empowered, making people engaged, making sure that they know that they are appreciated, and demonstrating that by, 1, not doing layoffs, 2, making sure that we spend dollars the right way so that they're out-of-pocket costs, like benefits we talked about yesterday offline. You know, it's one thing to give somebody a 3% raise, but then to add $300 a month to them on insurance costs, you quadruple wipe that raise out because it's net, right? So doing the right things that way, I think, is more important. And again, I think you can get there with one-time lump sums. I think that's the best way, because I think it says to them, you're valued. You can differentiate because we're experiencing a certain market blip, and that doesn't make the rest of the team feel out of whack. So to be able to come and say to PD and fire specifically, hey, we're not only going to do the 1% above the market that we normally do, which is already 5, now we're at 6, we're going to do 7. We're going to do a 3% one-time pop. That's very meaningful because it's cash in hand. It's lump sum. It's not paid out over 26 pay periods. So they can see it, but it doesn't add to your base cost. But that, again, it is a choice that y'all can make. But I would always invest in people before adding some paint on something.
Well, I agree with Richard. I mean, I think, we were talking about, the real cost of turnover, because I'm thinking to myself, what if the police officer looks like someone else is paying a little bit better, or maybe it's a little bit closer of a drive for me, and, it really offsets the let's say we give somebody 7% and someone else is giving them 8%, and that the savings in time and driving, I know for me it's a big deal, and I'd be more likely to accept a lower paying job if it's a little bit closer and more convenient for me, particularly now that things are remote, right? But we talked about the cost of turnover being 40% of the salary of an individual, and particularly in police and fire, given the ample amount of training that they have to go through, which I know that from going through the Citizens Police Academy, it's about a year program, right. Depending on the experience that you bring forth. And so that's a huge investment that we're making on somebody, and we need to protect that investment. And right. I think the way that we can protect that investment, coming from somebody that manages $61 billion a year in investments, I think that Richard is on the right path, and I concur with what he's saying.
Again, I can't disagree. I think where I'm having issue with, and I think it's my job to be as honest and transparent to you all. At the end of the day, you make the decisions. But I don't disagree with the investment. It's the methodology of the delivery of that investment is where I would caution. So.
Yes, if I may, I believe you came from the private sector before?
21 years, yes, sir.
Yes, and myself as well, working in finance and banking. And I think listening to all of this, there's a little bit of a disconnect, because we've just spent a lot of yesterday and a lot of today talking about teamwork, talking about, I think in your words and others, culture. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people work here or work at Pepsi or Ford or whatever always just on dollars and paycheck. Yes, that's important. That's why we all work, to pay our bills. But culture is important, having training, and as we learned yesterday and talking with fleet management this morning, having equipment, whether it's fire or PD or Parks Department or whoever, Public Works, that they can get in their equipment and get to do the job. All those things matter. Right. And I do know in discussions with leadership in police and fire, we have many officers here that have worked over 25 years. And as we've had the discussion about, going to 20-year pension versus 25, and I'll just repeat, when we were having that discussion, met a gentleman out the admin building, fire building. I believe Chief Latimer, you told me he had 37 years with the city. So I think that speaks to the culture, working in an environment where you're appreciated, where you have training, where you have opportunities for upward movement. Mm-hmm. Chief Latimer said this morning, about how he started here, he got trained here, and now he's training other officers and moving guys up, to lieutenant and captains and battalion commanders, et cetera. And I think you were kind of shortchanging all of these things. And I'm proud that I'm on the council here in Farmers Branch and not in some other cities that don't have to mention. And I think, as we've seen for the last years, that I think you've probably been instrumental in initiating employee awards and service pins and things. And again, comparing to where we were back in the Great Recession,
Sure.
and laying off people and morale was horrible, et cetera. We don't want to go back there. And we're in a dynamic and kind of a wild world in economy right now. We had the pandemic. We couldn't even shop. People couldn't even go to work.
Right.
You couldn't go to work unless you were police or fire in many places,
Right.
and for a long time. And then we came out of it. We had a super robust economy. Now we're going a little bit the other direction. And I think we have to be prudent. And the idea of putting some extra funds in something that you can use as incentive or merit or, going above and beyond, I'm a lot more comfortable with that. And also, we're going from the 25, or I believe we are going to improve, going from 25 to 20 year. And as we had yesterday, that looks like the best estimates we have. That may cost us $3.6 to $4 million or so.
Correct.
So it's not like we're not shortchanging police and fire. I don't think we are. And I know also from previous experience and discussions, we've had police officers, firefighters here that live in Oklahoma, and they're happy to have that long commute because they love their job and they love working here. Now, I can give other examples, and I know in PD and fire, we've recruited from Florida, we've recruited from Louisiana, et cetera. And so there are a lot of intangible things, and it's nice when people work somewhere where they enjoy their colleagues and they have that sense of a team, and I've got your back. And you don't have that everywhere, whether you're in the private sector or you're in the public sector.
That's true.
And we are going from the 25 to 20 year. And a lot of cities, when they do something like that, then they ask, okay, if we're going to give this to whatever set of employees or across the board, then we want to take something back. You've got to pay 2% or 3% more of your medical or something. We're not asking for that. So I think we're treating our, public service officials very well. And we have very low response rates in fire and police, and we always have historically. And another thing, going back to just the fairness and equity, if you're saying that I think everyone's going to be getting 4.5% merit raises, and then
That would be the budget.
Well,
Budget.
right.
Some people get 0, some people might get 6.
Exactly, but I can understand a situation where some employees might say, well, we're getting whatever, say 4.5, and fire and police, which you've said it's been our standard to pay at 105%. Now we're going to 107. Well, then why are they getting 109 or 110, or 7, 8, 9%, and I'm only getting 4? And again, that's part of your job.
Yes, sir.
Fairness and equity and all of that. But and again, that would just be increased costs going forward. And as we know, as the economy evolves, there are times, you can hire all the people you want for certain areas. And there are times where, like we are now, the labor market across the board is very tight.
Very tight.
And a last thing, to put on my economist hat, if we go to 10% increase for any staff, we're also contributing to inflation. And then we probably would be sitting here next year, well, we went to 8% or 10%, and so did Irving and Carrollton, and now we want to go 5 or 8% more. So we're contributing to an inflationary spiral by giving really big increase. And
Can be.
I don't think when you look at everything together, I'm not comfortable going to 9-10% increase in salaries.
I know that I think, and I can't speak for you, Mayor Dye, but I know you made a comment when we were having our TMRS meetings in the 25 and 20 year, and Charles had done a really good job. I had worked alongside him for many years to keep us from doing that. So just to be blunt, and there was a rational reason for that, and that rational reason was people still told us that they couldn't retire at that time. And so we were going to spend these dollars. This is before everybody else has done it, and we don't want to be the last ones, and a recruiting issue. But so those things change the dynamic. But people would tell us directly, no, I can't retire, but I would still like to have that and feel comfortable with it. Well, that's a big spend to feel comfortable. So I think now that we are in the inflationary environment that we are in, the tight labor market that we are in, adding that program, especially now because we don't want to be the last ones to Councilman Jackson's, and we don't. We like to be kind of cutting edge. I think it shocked the mayor that, because we thought it was going to be a slam dunk, and it didn't. It wasn't, and it wasn't because of the way of the funding. Now we're not asking for it to be funded through a contract, which as a businessman, which I am first before I'm HR, that causes me pause, because I would rather see some revenue offset the cost, at least some. But knowing that the intent is still to be positive for our employees, I'm 100% for that. And I think he noted that we thought it was just going to be a complete slam dunk. And then my caution to Charles all the time is you're hearing from a very, very small population. Very, very small population. It's very loud, but very small. Still love them. They're still part of my team. But they're the guys that will get out there and yell on the sidelines. Get moving, let's go, right? Which we need. But they were the small population. Now they're going to get the, potentially, if you all decide to vote for that, we move to that. That takes that out of play, and that's a big piece of the puzzle, and it does help us recruit. It does help us to retain, and I think it's a strong investment in our employees. I do agree. If you wish to put more dollars in PD and fire's hands, I'm supportive of that too. It's again, it's just a mechanism. So.
I was going to say,
We got several more weeks to talk about this. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made, and sitting up here going round and round about it without having any time to step back and actually think about what's been said, what we're looking at, what we're facing. The number that has come up to me during this last 45 minutes is about $600,000. That's if we choose to go one route, which full raise to 10% in that arena, or is there some middle ground of extra raise versus what we've asked for with the rehabilitation program, what we're going to potentially give to MetroCrest Services, what that looks like. We still have to go round and round and discuss about what we're going to do with our charitable organizations and nonprofits anyways, which is yet to be discussed here today, which I'm assuming will be at a future council date to deliberate once we have some more guidance and can give Sherelle a little bit more clarity. And so I'll be honest, if you could tell us where $600,000 would come from by the next time we meet, that might help us understand what we actually want to do. It's a round number. You said you want to.
Yeah, I do.
You want
I do.
to. So this is the high level number of.
So you're saying 600, is that the number that you've eyeballed for moving police from the 7% to the 10%? Is that the number that you're?
I'm putting that as the high end of if
that would be
correct, to go
yeah.
that route.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or are we going to forego other stuff, because that's what's kind of been said too.
Got it. So
rather-
you're basically saying 600,000 is the amount. Either we can do this thing or we can do that thing.
We can do A, B, and C. We can do just C.
Okay.
It might not be 600. It could be 200.
Yeah.
We don't know at the end
That's
of the day.
different, because I was
but
looking at 900.
I'm just looking for an outside number.
So I'll take that one better than what I thought I was looking for.
Find the number that satisfies a lot of the goals and objectives here that allow us to step back and really think about what do we want to prioritize in terms of what's been discussed and what council members have advocated for. And when we come back on the 16th during our discussion, we can revisit this again with more of a clear mind, knowing that we have just had a mountain of data and information dropped onto us that we need to sift through to regain what it is, where we want to go, and what do we want to advocate for as we move forward to hopefully reach consensus of this is our city's budget. But kind of what I've heard so far is, and one thing I want to ask everyone else is, are these the final lingering issues? Is everything else in the budget that we've heard, where it's at, how it's presented, something that we can all live with? Or are there other changes that Sherelle needs to be aware of that might change as she comes back? Because that's, going through this, that's what we need to know. If we just keep changing, this process goes on and on, we're going to need to have more meetings to cut back and forth. But the more things that we can say, this is good, put it aside, we're now dealing with this, it makes not only our job easier, it's going to make staff's job easier and get to a place to where we can really make some decisions, hear from the public, understand their concerns, or even they're good with this as well in terms of how we're attacking this year's budget and our objectives. And so that's kind of, like I said, I think we're just going to go round and round without anyone really being able to step back and be like, I need to hear what you said before I can say, do I actually agree with that or not? Or is it just off the cuff, emotional, and not balanced and well thought out? And I think that's what I would probably advocate for as we look at this, because it seems like these are the final few issues. Because I haven't heard anyone else speak up about anything else that is giving them pause or make them.
Yeah, there was a few other items that were on the list that we just haven't gotten to yet.
Okay, then I would say go ahead.
Okay. What was next? What was next, John, on the list that you had?
I think we
were at discussion.
We're just at council feedback.
Yeah,
Council
we
feedback.
did all the other items, so that was that was when I was asking, are we settled on the overall budget? And I heard moving the 7% to the 10%, and I heard discussion about additional funding for Retrreat. So those are the two in my short order taking that I was working on. Did you have others?
Well, just to clarify, the Retrreat amount, that's the 350 that considers the ask from the 230 ask plus the remaining amount for the two programs that we talked about.
That's my understanding. That's how we arrived at the 350. And this is a good question to ask. I heard the mayor just say 600 is an amount to be, because right now between those two individual things, that's a bigger.
That's $1 million.
Yeah, roughly. 9, it's $1 million. So what am I looking for? Am I looking for $1 million or am I looking for 600?
It looks like right now it's, I think, it's about 350 plus 600, so that's 950.
Lord, okay. I'm gonna do my best, I always do.
So one thing that I did want to talk about is, Sherelle, can you help me find where, I guess the amount that we're allocating to the Farmers Branch Chamber of Commerce?
Yes. So I'm going to direct you to an area that includes all of the funding to our organizational partners. And within there, I'm looking at you, Ben, or I can pull it out of the budget myself. Hold on, give me 1 second. You want to be on page 31.
Okay.
I already put a highlight on it because I knew somebody was going to ask me where it was. So you want to be on page 31. That is within the general fund tab. And general contracts, that 303,400, that is under proposed budget. That is where basically all of the funding for our neighborhood partners, be it Retrreat, be it the Chamber, there's a few others that are included within there. That is where those amounts are housed. Give me a second, or maybe I can visit with you offline and I can talk with you about the specifics of the Farmers Branch Chamber, which is within there. I just need to pull it out of our software.
It's on the slide right now, if you can push that to the council's prompters. There it is.
Okay. I know that we've charged you with the task of finding an extra $1 million with the $600,000 that we talked about plus the $350. That gets us to $950, which means there's a delta of about $50,000. And I'm hoping we might be able to, with that extra 50, see if we might be able to do something for the chamber.
Okay.
Same task, but now we're just being a little bit more specific with that remaining amount.
So I just want to be clear to all of you as council members and to the public, like, this is not some sort of magic act that's about to happen.
I know.
This is like, what we have presented is what we believe in our being is the best, option in terms of expenditures, et cetera. So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna have to go back and figure out which other expenditures don't work, don't fit this profile, and present you all with some options. So
That's
it's
what
not
we need to
magic.
know.
Okay.
What are we cutting to keep that rate the same?
Okay.
Well, just for consideration as well, we're entering year 3 of the contracts. They'll be up, they're in our strategic plan to be renegotiated as part of the next fiscal year. And while it shows the amounts, they're performance-based contracts, and so they're not always met, so sometimes there's a little bit of a delta. And they also, the contracts, even though they show a decrease, what was removed from it though is all their dues and events used to be in their contract structure. So we would already be title sponsor, we'd already be this kind of membership. It had really kind of defined hierarchy of what we were going to do. Instead, we removed those from all of the different organizations and said your dues are separate, create great events, and council as your direction in your budget, there's the Friday lunches, right? And so those are included in the revenue stream. So you really look at what's going to the chambers, they're generating at least about $5,000 to $7,000 a year on events and membership in addition to what they currently have in here. And then one of the contracts unfortunately failed to perform, and so it was removed from the budget and it never got charged at all. So just giving a little bit of an update. So that may be one thing to consider, is that these contracts are all up for renewal in this next year. And the reason for that was, Mayor Dye, you're the veteran on council at this time, is we would spend 4 and 5 meetings hashing out these numbers here. And when you look at Sherrell's proposed budget, it's infinitesimally larger and a lot bigger themes going on. You're talking millions, hundreds of millions versus several hundred thousand. And so that's why we went to the multi-year structure. But that is something that will be coming back to you all for consideration. And the chambers are kind of limitless on creating great events to bring you all in for support. And that has proven somewhat to be effective. But just food for thought.
And it's all our budget. I mean, we work the financial background of it, but it's ours. It's a team sport.
So a couple of things, Sherelle, on the MetroCrest services line, don't we also have a commitment to their building fund? Have we already paid that, or is that to come, or is there an additional amount, and what is that?
That's out of ARPA, and that was already allocated in this year's budget that we're in.
Okay, and how much was that again?
Couple hundred. Don't make me, I'll tell you. Give me a moment.
Okay. So the other thing too that I wanted to make sure that, folks that are watching, listening, understood, we just got this letter today, or at least I did, from MetroCrest. And the reason why they're asking us for this one-time award of $230,000, one of the reasons, obviously, the increase in the need is a big reason, but also funding that they were getting through the CARES Act has been exhausted and is no longer in place. That's $1.3 million of funds that they are losing in that program. So now, in order to keep up with the demand, they're needing money from other sources, and they're coming to us. The other thing that this letter does also say is that they anticipate providing $330,000 in rental support to Farmers Branch families and seniors. Okay, so we all know MetroCrest Services is Farmers Branch, Addison, Carrollton. This is specifically the amount of money that they anticipate spending to benefit Farmers Branch families and seniors, right? In addition to the senior repair program that we're considering.
Well, and that's just rental. That's just the rental.
Agreed.
Not not
Agreed.
not food or
Right.
the other services cross.
But my point
spectrum
is, the
ones.
money's not going to, we're not sharing this money necessarily with Carrollton or Addison. This is aiding the Farmers Branch community. So I want to make that clear because everyone knows Metro Crest as a multi-community organization.
Yeah, one would have to assume that Tracy Eubanks sent a similar letter to the other councils asking for a dollar amount specific to their particular communities. So totally anticipate that on his action plan.
Well, and I'll just point out as well, they're allocating $100,000 of our annual contract with them specifically on preventing homelessness, which we have identified as we have sat here for the past 2 days as a growing problem. And that our police department has told us that is not a problem they can solve themselves, by themselves. It is not it is not just a police issue. Our homelessness issue is not just a police issue. So I just want us to keep that in mind, that when we're talking about safety for our communities, the fire and police play a huge role in that. They're not the only partners in our safety.
You still got the gavel.
I should have given it up when you returned. All right, so have we given Ms. Sherrill the direction that we're all comfortable with up here to work some magic, readjust some funds? I think one of the things that I'll add to the conversation is, and Sherrill, we talked about this a little bit before, is making sure that we understand those policy mandates around the fund balances. I think would be a good opportunity with this feedback that you're about to embark on to make sure that we have those numbers, whether it's 15 to 20% in the general fund, where are we at on all of those particular elements as well.
Would you like to see that as a part of the presentation on the next time that we gather?
Yes.
Because it is I'll direct you to it and I'll show you how you can find it and how we calculate it.
Yeah.
We'll spend a little time
I think
on
it
that.
would be good to both direct us to how to find it, but I'd also like to suggest that it would be in a presentation as well.
Will do.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, do we have more discussion? Do we have other issues to iron out?
Do we need to come back tomorrow?
And do we want to come back tomorrow? Do we need? Perhaps that's a better phraseology. Is there a need for us to come back tomorrow? Do we want to just walk? Omar, need to come back tomorrow?
No, I think I'm fine. Thank you.
Michael?
I would say no, based on the fact that I think we've gone through all the departments and, we've had opportunity the last 2 days to ask our questions. And those of us who want to get some other details and feedback can do that with different departments. And again, this is a process we're at the beginning of, not at the end. And I think it, as the mayor indicated, it probably makes a lot more sense that in our next meeting, Sherrill will have some more possibilities and options. And then it might make more sense that, we continue these discussions.
Very good.
I don't, because I think, we've got to know what we can work with, and rather than just talking about, well, we'd like to do this and we'd like to help and grow with all the departments, but we have to be frugal and realistic. So I don't think we need another day tomorrow, personally.
Very good. Tracy?
I do not want to come back tomorrow. I do not need to come back tomorrow. I am sure that Sherrill can get us the information that we need, and And I think we need to save for future discussions, so.
Very good. Thank you. Richard?
I don't think we need to come back tomorrow. I do have one ask, Stacy. If we could get a copy, whether that's paper or electronic, doesn't matter to me, of the presentations that were made yesterday, that would be helpful for me to sort of reflect and note. Thank you.
All right, and I will weigh in that I don't see a need for us to come back tomorrow. I do have a question, though, because our next meeting will be a regular meeting. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, that we had set that for a discussion point with the public, or has that been determined? And maybe that's a question for John.
Sure, the next meeting, we have budget on the agenda. Was that in study and regular?
It's definitely on study session as a regular item.
Okay.
So that would be an opportunity for us to
Okay.
revisit this, any particular topics that we have open.
Fair enough. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't walk ourselves into a public hearing and not have those items ironed out. That was my...
Yeah, I think this will be more of a study session conversation.
good.
We'll look at it tomorrow and get that out, but
Understood.
that's the intent right now.
Fair enough, and I think that's a good way to end this. So, no other discussion? Well, Brian, go ahead.
Make it quick, Mr. Beasley.
Yes, sir, I sure will. I was asked, I was asked yesterday about contract employees.
Yes.
So to be clear, not contractual services like a firm that does something for us, but actual contract employees. We have 9.
Okay.
9 contract employees across the entity. I can break those out for you if you'd like, but that's the number, 10-9.
I'll get that from you, or if you want to share
Sure,
that with the
I
council,
can
that'd be
certainly do
fine.
that. And I am working on the Intech numbers, and I will have those hopefully for sure this week.
All right. Are we good?
I just wanted to, I went back to my slide. You said next week when we get together, we have a study session topic to just reconvene and talk about the budget.
Correct.
And there will also be something on the regular agenda for setting the maximum tax rate.
Very good. I wanted to make
We go
sure.
through that process every year of saying what the maximum tax rate could be.
It's
Okay.
very good. I was making sure that we're adhering to the process and not pinning ourselves into a, wedge, if you will. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Time now is 4:30. We'll adjourn our study session on the budget annual retreat.
Great stuff, man.
Wow.